So I was leaving rehearsal yesterday for the play that I'm directing, which, by the way, it's going up in a couple of weeks. It's called The Goatman. It's part of the She NYC Festival.
Goatman?
And tickets are available right now. We'll put a link down in the notes just for the fun of it. I was talking with my stage manager, who I'm working with for the first time on this, about the show, about The Worst of All Possible Worlds. Mm-hmm. And we got to talking about like Mr. Beast, because it's basically just what was I up to this weekend. We were talking about what we were up to this weekend. Of course, I had to talk about Beast Week, which is over, thank God.
Beast Week lives on in our hearts.
But I started talking about Beast games a little bit too loud, I think.
No.
Because I was just standing out on the sidewalk on 8th Ave, right? And some guy walked over to me and was like, yo, man, were you on Beast games? And what I meant to say was...
No. Oh, no.
No, man, no. What I said was, oh, God, no. I felt really bad.
And that man? Jimmy Donaldson.
No, it was just some
Josh
guy.
insulted a dullard on the street.
I
You hurt a normie's feelings.
He was about to hand you a Feastables that he had purchased just for the occasion.
So excited, and I think just thinking about Beast games put me in such a bad mood that I took it out on this poor, unfortunate, 22-year-old normal man.
That man turns around and is like, he'll see. Once I win Beast Games Season 2, then I will seek my vengeance on Joshua Borman.
Pretty much.
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
Welcome to the Worst of All Possible Worlds, the first and only podcast to seek its revenge on Joshua Borman. I am the worst of all possible AJs.
I'm the worst of all possible Bryans.
And I'm the worst of all possible Joshes.
And I'm taking revenge on you!
I was going to say, Brian, it's your
that's
week.
Me. I did that. It's my week.
For revenge by showing us MASH? I guess it's not really revenge.
Yeah, that's
We're just talking about MASH this week.
Vengeful at all. If it was vengeance that I was after, I'd show you Trapper John MD.
You did! You sent me so many clips of Trapper John MD.
I sent you 2 clips.
It felt like a million.
We're back for another bangers of MASH. 2 bangers, 2 MASH is what I recommended for the title. We'll see if that's what sticks.
We're in seasons 4 and 5.
Yeah, we are in a major transitional point in the series MASH, right? The first time around, we talked about those first 3 seasons. Because they're linked to the movie, because they're linked to the book, because they're the beginning of the show, it is, I think, the solid image that most people have in their head of MASH. You've got Trapper John, you've got Colonel Henry Blake, you've got Frank Burns, you've got Radar, you've got Klinger. You know, he's not there right from the start, but he's in there. You still have the sort of frat boy hijinks of it all and the kind of casual sexism of it all.
Right.
At the end of season 3, McLean Stevenson, who played Colonel Henry Blake, leaves the show. He's going to move on to what he hopes were going to be better and brighter things. And they ended up being not very successful sitcoms led by him.
Greatest regret of his life, according to him.
His character is famously killed off at the end of that season, and everybody's ready to roll into season 4. However, there is yet another hitch.
Right.
Wayne Rogers, who plays Trapper John McIntyre, decides he wants to negotiate a better deal. Now, the exact details of this, hard to say, because it's contract negotiations. There's just not someone going out there being like, I was demanding this much money and blah, 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 blah. No.
Especially when you don't get it. You don't go out and brag about a contract you couldn't land.
Well, and Wayne Rogers, first and foremost, really was a businessman. He acted a lot because he liked acting, but he used a lot of his early gigs as launch pads into larger business ventures. So he got into investment. He and a Fox executive got into real estate together. So I think he came into this as a businessman. He's like, okay, my role is obviously getting smaller over the years. I'm going to negotiate something better for myself. So he negotiated going into season 3. And they were like, Buck, it really looks like we're going to lose this guy. So they contacted this actor named Mike Farrell. And they were like, hey, Wayne Rogers might be leaving the show. How do you feel about coming into MASH? And he was like, okay, that sounds neat. And then nothing happened.
Right. As these things often do.
And then after Henry Blake was killed off, the next season is rolling. I think what ended up, I couldn't confirm this. People have said this, but I wasn't able to find an actual confirmation that they had actually written the first episode of the season, which we will talk about as the second episode of the season. Because then Wayne Rogers finally said, okay, no, I'm taking my shit and I'm walking. So they had to make a new season premiere based around the departure of Trapper John.
Yeah, because it does kind of feel like two repilots back to back.
Yeah.
Because they're introducing two characters and each of those episodes in the two-parter is done in the way that you would normally do that. It's a little disorienting, and we'll talk about both parts of that in a little bit.
Yeah, and so this, because of the way that it's syndicated, the first episode of the season was an hour long and gets syndicated as a two-parter. So it's almost like there are 3 season premieres.
Okay, this is getting out of hand.
Now there are 3 of them.
It's just always so nice to return to this show because it's good. Do you know what I mean?
Just
like
good.
We've
just
been
good.
wading through such slurry over the last couple weeks that to come to something like this that is just so assured in its vision that from this first episode we get everything that makes MASH a great show, right? We get comedy and we get the drama.
AJ, are you saying that you don't take solace in Wits Endless Summer? That doesn't feed your creative soul?
I mean, it does, but not in the way
you'd think.
But not in the way you'd think. It's the only way it can come. So we enter into.
Oh no, you're gooning to Odyssey?
Ooh! That's the noise I make.
Oh.
When I goon to Adventures in Goonacy.
Well, because
Adventures in
Here's an issue that I have with the term gooning and the way that it's been. You can't fight the change of language, right? It's always shifting and whatever. But gooning used to mean you masturbate like someone who's on something awful, which means you set aside 9.5 hours,
right?
And you do it. Sometimes there's meth, sometimes there's not. You know,
and not only that, but also that you set up like 12 to 14
multiple screens,
displays.
Yeah.
You surround yourself. Now
you build
a
cave for it.
Now it's just a synonym for jerking it. And I think that's unfortunate.
Is that true? Has it really just made its way to being that as opposed to all the screens?
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah, because gooning is like you make the masturbation your life.
Right.
Whereas now it's just like, you're gooning now. It's like, no, I'm just cranking my penis. Please close the door. You can be in the door or out the door. Just close it.
That was really embarrassing last week. And I did have to close the door, and I apologize, Brian.
Okay. Thank you. I don't know if I forgive you yet. So this episode does something right at the start that's a little weird because it's kind of left this style behind. It opens the same way that the movie does, with the big like quotes on the screen of Douglas MacArthur and whatever.
Repilot.
We get an image of these flags being hoisted into the air that we never see. We usually just see the American flag at the 4077. And here we're seeing an American flag, a South Korean flag, and a UN flag.
Which is upside down, by the way. I didn't notice that. That was funny.
Yeah.
It means the UN is in peril, Josh.
Oh, no.
Yeah. They're not used to flying these flags, right? But now we haven't gotten a new CO yet at the MASH unit. So Frank Burns, the dreaded Frank Burns, is now in charge.
The worst man you could have in charge of your unit imaginable.
This guy is the best worst character.
Yes.
Like, he would be so despicable if he wasn't so lovingly played.
Yes.
Yeah, he's just, they find, kind of in the same way that they're able to find with Steve Carell in The Office, they're like, oh, what if we just make him a child?
Right.
He's a little kid in a grown man's body, and he's also deeply Republican in this case. Not necessarily Michael Scott, although I don't know. Maybe he is. Maybe Michael Scott is
Republican. Yeah.
He voted for Trump twice, but he got pressured into it by a girl.
Right. And now he's like, well, I didn't vote for that.
Yeah. And because Burns is in charge, this also means that Major Margaret, aka Hot Lips Houlihan, is also in charge. At the beginning of season 4, she has matured a little bit, but she's still a bit of the old sidekick psycho that we know her to be. This is a pretty good opening. This is a great way to start your season, start your extra long episode. Of course, they're doing all this stuff. Klinger is, of course, at the roll call in his dress, and Frank has one of the only clever bits of commanding that he does, where he says, because Klinger is wearing the dress to get a Section 8 and to get booted, Frank says, if you show up in a dress tomorrow, I'm going to promote you.
Somebody stole his personal ham that was sent to him by an insurance man. What I love about MASH is that every joke opens 9,000 questions that the show will never answer. And that's great.
Just leaves it up to your imagination.
This episode is credited to Everett Greenbaum and James Fritzl, who had written a couple episodes in the previous season. And they get a lot of credits in these couple seasons. Larry Gelbart is still the showrunner, such as it is. Everything still really goes through him. I was reading a little bit of Ken Levine, who's a writer who shows up in season 5. I was reading.
Then he went on to make BioShock. Yeah,
and he did. Yes.
Very stand-up, very normal guy.
But Ken Levine talked about, and I'm sorry, I've probably said his name is Ken Levine before. It is actually Levine.
No, Levine is the guy who made BioShock.
Yes. And Ken Levine talks about Gelbart having written the first 4 seasons basically himself. So I think a lot of the episodes that are credited to other people, it's sort of like Aaron Sorkin. Like they wrote something and then it got to Gelbart and he rewrote the whole thing himself.
I feel like Aaron Sorkin takes a lot more credit than Gelbart does in this case.
For sure.
Because he's just like teleplay by me, story by credit, everyone gets. But this one, like full writing credit, right?
Yeah.
And this is sort of the earlier days of the WGA. So there's probably a lot of like rules that have not been necessarily implemented yet in terms of like the amount of stuff that you have to write in order to receive credit on a thing.
I mean,
you have to be able to prove it in court, actually.
Writing 25 episodes a year is so fucking crazy.
Yes.
And
even if they are only 22 minutes, like that.
Yeah. I mean, before this point, like in the 50s and 60s, right? If you look at like Leave It to Beaver, which ran for maybe 6 seasons, there's almost 300 episodes of that show. Because they were doing like 35 to 40 episodes.
They were giving those kids cocaine and just like, go.
These poor children. Like that's just, and with smaller writing rooms, those would be like writing rooms of 2 to 4 people.
Whereas
with like MASH, the 70s, like things grew bigger. However, another thing that happened in the 70s was people would rewrite. In the 50s, you couldn't afford to rewrite. You just wrote it and you shot it. So anyway, Hawkeye rolls into the roll call because he's been away. He's been on leave. He's been in Tokyo having a good time.
He's been sucking and fucking non-stop, apparently.
In a way that the geisha was on his back.
Yes.
And I don't understand the logistics of that, but...
Well, it's just a massage in that instance. She was just... Because he said she ran a mile just on his back or something like that.
Oh, I thought it was like a loop around situation.
What? Does that mean?
Like he looped it. He looped his dick to the back.
Looped his cock?
Yeah, he looped it. He looped
over his back?
Yeah, over his back. Like a continental soldier.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Which is what he is.
That shit hangs low. I feel you.
Yeah.
Okay, continue. Not you, AJ, Brian.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh. So Hawkeye is very hungover. He goes straight into the showers and showers with his clothes on and everything. Yeah. So while he's in the shower, Radar comes in, and it turns out that he has some news for Hawkeye.
Softly, Radar, talking small letters. I have the Mount Rushmore of hangovers. 6 aspirin companies are bidding for my head. But I want to tell you, folks.
Yes, sir.
You ever had a mouthful of cotton, Radar?
No, sir, we were vegetarians. Listen.
I think I'll have my breakfast in here. Soap could only improve it.
We couldn't reach you in Tokyo. We tried for 24 hours.
That was the idea. I was on R&R, resting and recreating.
Yeah, well, we couldn't find you any place.
I was with an unlisted geisha. She did the mile in 10 minutes and 8 seconds and never left my back.
Well, I just wanted you to know that we couldn't reach you. And we really tried.
What'd you need me for? You had Frank Burns and trusty Trapper John. Champion of the oppressed and molester of registered nurses.
He's gone, Hawkeye. He got his orders. He's been shipped stateside.
What?
Trapper's gone. He got his orders.
Yeah, I mean, their previous episode of this series, they had to say goodbye to a character. They made one of the most memorable goodbyes to a character that you could make. And now all of a sudden they're coming back and they have to say goodbye again to someone who won't come back, you know, who won't even be there to exit the show. Maybe because he was worried they'd kill him too. I don't know.
I mean, could be.
There's a mark on my head.
I'll kill again. I'm Larry Gelbart and I'm thirsting for blood.
I have to write 23 of these. Listen. Somebody's got to go. But yeah, you can hear it in that clip, but like how much the Marx Brothers influence the writing of the comedy in this show. It's like just keep throwing out zingers, even if some miss. The cumulative effect is like you will laugh at some point over the course of this, right?
Even if you're not laughing, you're like, God damn, I wish I could talk like that.
Yeah. Hawkeye is so cool because he's able to come up with this stuff so quickly, right? Talking small letters is so good.
But he's also, I don't know, kind of annoying, right? And I mean that not in a, like, I don't like watching it kind of way. It's like this is his way of existing, I guess. Like, he needs to keep the patter going just to keep his own brain safe. Like, it's grounded in who the character is.
Well, and it's so funny because when you watch interviews with Alan Alda during the time that MASH is filming, it's different now, but back at that point, whenever people are interviewing him, he talks like Hawkeye.
So
like,
he's just really quippy the whole time.
It gets so under his skin. And he even refers to Hawkeye as like not even really a separate character, but also not himself, but this sort of synthesis.
Sure.
Right.
And
well, I mean, he also starts writing for him, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's like
he writes a pretty significant number of episodes, especially in the later seasons of the
One
show.
of which is in this set that we're going to be talking about today.
And I understand what that's like to like live with a character and have that sort of start infecting like your just normal everyday speech patterns.
Well, and it's interesting. Yeah, there are a lot of very literate actors on this show that makes them fit the dialogue really well. I mean, there are a lot of people who aren't very bright who can deliver that very bright dialogue very well. There are people who aren't very bright who can write that very bright dialogue pretty well.
Aaron Sorkin.
And
well, you know what? He admits it. That's the thing about Sorkin. He's just like, I'm an idiot. I can mimic the sound of intelligence.
That's false
but
modesty.
I am not
That's false modesty. He thinks he's really fucking smart.
I think maybe now,
I can go online and can look up a bunch of facts and have a character rattle them off, and that's what smartness is. Whereas here, it's that Marx Brothers thing. It's that back and forth and that weird reimagining of ideas. You know, do you ever have your mouth full of cotton? No, we were vegetarian. What does that even mean? Who cares? Right?
Yeah.
Alan Alda's cock apparently covers his entire back, according to AJ. So it turns out that Trapper has left, but he's not totally gone yet. Maybe Hawkeye has a chance to catch up to him.
Yeah.
So Trapper is at Kimpo, about to fly out, and so Hawk just takes a Jeep along with Radar, who signed it out, and they fucking floor it. Also running by an MP checkpoint.
What are they going to do? Throw us out of the war? And it's like, yes, Hawkeye.
Yeah, he keeps going. He has Radar fake an illness so that he can get by without too much trouble. Hijinks. We're doing some hijinks. Meanwhile, back at the 4077, Frank and Margaret have gotten a hold of BJ's file.
Whoa.
And they're going over it and they're fantasizing about the kind of man that this could be.
Frank, look. Honeycutt's fresh out of residency, Stanford Medical School, wonderful qualifications.
And look at this, Tau Phi Epsilon.
Is that a very selective fraternity?
Very. They blackballed me.
Oh,
Well, they insisted on double-breasted tuxedos. I didn't have one.
poor baby.
I dyed my brown suit, but it ran when I danced.
You tend to perspire, Frank.
Well, it's a family thing on my mother's side. Dad was always dry, but Mom sweated a lot. Yeah, I've got his face and her glands.
This top 10 every time he graduated.
Well, he certainly sounds like our kind of person. Oh, it'll be a welcome change from all the guff we took from those two smart skis. Honeycutt. I knew a Dr. Honeycutt. He was killed in an explosion at the goiter clinic.
What an opportunity. A young doctor on his first assignment, and we'll train him our way, Frank.
You know, Margaret, I have a feeling. I'll bet he's Republican.
Oh. That would be too much to ask.
I wrote funniest Republicans on television and then went, the Bluths are definitely in there too. But genuine misdirect for me. I thought that Honeycutt was going to be someone else, that he was going to be an imposter, that the guy who died in the goiter explosion was in fact the real one, and this was some guy pretending to be him.
Yeah, it's a little bit more economy of storytelling than what we get from this episode, because also this episode was really only needed to be a half-hour episode, and it's a full hour for some reason. Right. Because
I do like that, like, you sit in it, right?
Yeah,
like, it does allow you to like sit in the thing.
It's not boring. It's not a bad episode by any stretch. It's a very good episode, in fact. But yeah, like this idea that they're setting up for BJ, I can see how you, having seen the first 3 seasons of MASH, would think, okay, this is just going to lead to a silly plot with a character who doesn't stay on. Right. And then we'll resolve that later.
But no, this is establishing the character who is going to end up being the replacement for Trapper John. And with Frank, although he obviously is very excited about the prospect of having a man who is, very much like straight edge and it can be a Republican and join the disciplinary side of the unit, he also has quite a bit of insecurity. And this is the thing about, I noticed that with these episodes that you pick, Brian, a lot of them are Frank-centric. They are about Frank's neuroses. They are about the man that Frank wishes that he was or maybe could be. Right. Because on some level, Frank desires to be perceived as the alpha. That's his big thing. And so there's this worry that when this guy comes in, he's going to maybe show him up somehow or take over or be a bigger, badder man than Frank can be.
Or finally, he has a soldier in his fight against Hawkeye, right?
Yeah.
Because he's overrun by these tomfooleries.
Right.
But now that Trapper's gone, Hawkeye doesn't have his best friend. Maybe at long last, he can get a hold on this fucking camp.
The lines are really good, but it was kind of visual in nature, so I didn't clip it, where he's like stroking this picture of, I forget if it's Douglas MacArthur or if it's President Truman.
I think it's MacArthur.
Yeah, because he wants to sign it from Doug.
Because he's set up Blake's office in his own image. And of course, he resented Henry Blake so much because Blake was weak-willed. I mean, he barely ran that camp. He was so nervous and so pathetic and so busy with, drinking and womanizing that he couldn't turn it into the fascist hellhole that Frank Burns always wanted it to be.
Right. Yes. But also like a half-hearted fascist hellhole. Yeah. Right? Right,
because he's too weak.
He doesn't command respect, so no one's actually following his orders.
So Hawkeye gets to Kimpo, has this scene at the little airfield where he grabs the schedule and he sees that the flight left 10 minutes ago. Yeah. However, it just turns out that BJ Honeycutt has arrived at the same time that Trapper left, which means that Hawkeye and Radar can be a convenient ride back to Odyssey. Sorry, the MASH 4077. No. Because yes, Adventures in Odyssey stole this plot.
God
when
damn
Whit
it.
left and Jack Allen was at the airport.
Oh,
that's right.
Yeah.
I also noticed, it jumped out at me, I don't remember if it was this episode or one of the other ones, where one of the characters said, "Don't make a federal case out of it." And my ears perked right the fuck up. Because there was a child in Adventures in Odyssey who said that one time.
Yep. I think that's a recurring line in Adventures in Odyssey. And in this case, it was Frank Burns talking about his own medical malpractice in an Army field hospital, which of course is a federal case.
But I will say, as somebody who watched pretty much exclusively secular content growing up, that "don't make a federal case out of it" was also probably in Power Rangers. I think I remember somebody saying that in Power Rangers.
I think it's like a thing that children have said for about 100 years.
Well, they're not saying it anymore.
You don't know that. How many children have you been arguing with and making cases about stuff about?
I mean, none, but I never... Have you heard a child say "don't make a federal case out of it"?
I don't know with kids. I don't know. Maybe they are.
I hear them yelling at each other all the time. I live in a building with a bunch of kids who are always playing around, and I hear them
children
scream.
in New York. This is Middle America that we're talking about. You wouldn't know anything about that, Josh. We're talking about the Heartland.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
So
real America, Josh.
Every fucking child in Omaha, when another kid is getting up their ass about something, they're like, "Well, don't make a federal case out of it."
Yeah. Well, some kid who watches a lot of old TV and is thinking that he's really smart and is going to win the argument might say it.
Oh, so Brian Alford, in other words.
Yes, maybe.
Okay.
Brian Alford, famously from Omaha, Nebraska.
And famously a child.
Well, speaking of children.
Radar.
Yeah, I was going to say, Gary Berghoff,
here
Radar.
With BJ and Hawkeye, and their Jeep has been stolen. A Jeep that he checked out. So this is on his ass. And the only thing around here is an officer's club. Of course, Radar is not an officer. He's enlisted. He's a corporal. He's not allowed to go in. They just stick BJ's captain's bars on his hat. And they go into the officers club, and Radar orders his famous grape knee high.
Right. What I love about this scene, because there's an officer who comes in and is basically like, "What are you doing in here?"
Yeah.
And Hawkeye has this excuse that they're trying out a new rank that combines captain and corporal together into one. And does he think it works? Like, I don't like that at all. But what I love about it is that all of Hawkeye's schemes are plausible. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, it's never so
because
extreme.
the army is such an absurd place, right? That's what it's always running off of. You're in a world where things don't quite make sense.
Yeah, it feels like Catch-22, and like I think that's what MASH, because I came to Catch-22 first, and that's always all the bells that it's ringing are the absurdity of that. It has yet to get as bleak and cynical, I feel, as Catch-22 eventually goes to.
It never does. It's never, I think it gets to some very serious points, but it's never a fully cynical show like all of that. Or like arguably the movie version of MASH.
Well, that just ends in a football game.
I know. It's like, what the hell? Anyway.
What a good movie. What a great movie that we are right about.
There's a weird like split because again, in syndication, they split this up into a 2-parter where they play like the first 5 minutes again. And you see the roll call again, but some of the footage is different. They've like mixed it around, and then they have like an extended previously on bit. Anyway, our boys steal a Jeep from a general in order to get back to the 4077. They pay it forward. They're making their way back. I didn't grab any more clips from this episode because so much of the storytelling in this one is actually very visual. They had a bigger budget to work with, so they took some bigger cues, had more special effects, had more actors on screen, had more locations out in the California mountains outside Malibu. And there's a great little conversation towards the beginning of the part 2 episode where Frank is talking about calling the father. And then Margaret's like, oh, I'm going to go somewhere else. And he calls her mother on the way out.
Yeah.
Just wanted to point out that little bit of dialogue.
And interesting that.
The 477 becomes sort of secondary to what is going on with BJ and Hawkeye and Radar, because they end up driving straight into the action. That's why there were so many MPs and stuff around, was because this was turning hot. So they come across a family of farmers whose daughters are sweeping for mines in their own field using sticks. Oof. They get injured. Of course, this came from a lot of the research on MASH was just people calling up various either doctors who were mentioned in the book MASH or just other people who fought in Korea and getting their real stories. This came from one of those real stories.
I think they are trying to accomplish something that they maybe weren't quite able to accomplish yet. Technically,
I agree.
This storytelling falls short of what is needed to make this moment work.
Yeah.
Because basically what happens is, you got these Korean girls minesweeping with sticks, and there's a family that's like watching them do it. One of them hits the mine explodes, and Radar runs in to what is still potentially an active minefield, grabs the girl,
for her,
pulls her back out. And then, of course, they all have to take her to a local civilian hospital.
Yeah.
The thing that makes this scene kind of strange, though, is that, first of all, there's way too much air between the cuts, so the pacing feels off.
Yeah.
But also there's this tension between the comedy of it and the drama of it. Like there's this bit where it's like the dad who's there has this ox and he wants to go on the Jeep to go with them, but the ox can't fit on the Jeep.
Right,
it's
when
like,
they're driving to the hospital. Yeah.
It's like, this is not a time to be doing jokes. Like this is not.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that to me kind of read like a true fact from the story that they felt they needed to include.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like, and you can. Like you absolutely can. You can do that in a way that's truthful without making it look like, ha.
Now we're doing jokes.
These goofy ass Koreans.
That's what it, and it feels like that too, because they kind of upbraid the farmer for having his daughters do this. Hawkeye yells what he thinks is a Korean insult and then accidentally just calls him an umbrella. Yeah, I feel like because this show is usually kind of smart enough to point at the issue of like, where are these bombs coming from, right? We see that in a later episode and they're like, I don't know, he didn't sign it, right? What does it matter to them who's dropping the bombs on them? Because we're the ones here, we're the reason it's happening.
Right.
And here it's like, well, just look at this scumbag old Korean guy who, they don't even speak really. The characters.
No.
Sure. Yeah. We wouldn't understand them anyway, but it's like, we don't get any glimpse into their inner lives.
Right.
And then they're gone after this scene.
Which is somewhat unusual for this show, particularly at this point where, generally speaking, even though the portrayals of the Koreans are sometimes pretty racist, they are at least afforded some degree of like agency and inner life, which you just don't see here at all.
No. And it's a shame because a little later in the episode, we get what I think is a very effective, like battle intense scene where they're getting mortared right on the way back. Basically, this episode feels like, oh, you were complaining that we spent too much time at the 4077? Here's all of Korea. Here's all of Korea.
So, yeah, well, and we might as well talk about that now because they end up driving alongside these troops that are moving from one place to another. This is kind of, I don't know, there's something very stirring about the way this scene starts, right? With the men just sort of walking by and the kind of chat that they have from the Jeep to these guys who are going to a much more dangerous place than to where our protagonists are going. As they go on, they run into some Korean fellows who are walking around, and then all of a sudden that group of guys disappears suddenly. And then there's gunshots, there's fire. This is BJ's first day on the job, and he is not at the Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. He is on the battlefield. He is seeing the worst stuff that he can see, even before settling into the usual horrors that go day to day.
Yeah. They even get the color of blood right.
Yeah, this is one of the only times you see a person bleeding. You see blood on an actual soldier, right? That's not something they delve into too much on this show because it's television and everything, but they were able to get it here.
And some of that is probably grounded in standards and practices of the time. You had to really fight with the FCC about stuff like this.
Yeah, but they actually utilize that to their effect very well in this because you see BJ look at a soldier because Hawkeye's like, no, that guy's gone. Don't worry about it. Yeah. He's like, no, we can help him.
Turns his body up and sees his face, and we don't see it.
All you see is him moving away and retching. Yeah. And it's like, what would make a doctor
a surgeon
a surgeon even do that? It must be so fucking gnarly.
Which, and again, they can't actually show him puking or even really play what the sound is, but you get
it's kind of a coughing. Yeah.
You know what's going on. And that worked so well because also part of what goes on here is that the sound mixing, they are leaving air for things that need air. And I would say it is a little bit Altman-esque, the way that it's just like open. It feels open.
Yeah, this also shows a really interesting contrast between BJ, this brand new character, and Radar. Radar is a kid, and they really play up the fact that he is this kid from Ottumwa, Iowa. You know, he raises cows, and most of his picture of the world is drinking grape knee high and hanging out with his uncle and things like that. And he runs straight forward into things, right? This stuff does not affect him anymore.
Right.
Because he's been around it for a long time. And BJ, it's still brand new. And even though he's a surgeon and he has cut people open before, he sees the mangled face of that soldier, and it's too much for him.
And I think that Gary Berghoff here there are times, particularly when he's out, like in the officers club and stuff like that, where he's making weak choices from a performance perspective.
Sure.
Where it's very like you are playing the idea of this is a little kid, right? As opposed to like actually staying in the moment, playing the intention, like being there. But I think in these moments where it's like shit is getting real and he has to go for it, then he's able to find commitment as a performer to what the moment demands of him. And it's extremely impressive.
Well, and I think too, it's like he was playing a different role at the beginning of the show. He played a different role in the movie. And over time, Gene Reynolds and the writers decided that he was going to be Charlie Brown again.
Right.
And he had gotten away from Charlie Brown, right? He played Charlie Brown off Broadway for years.
Yeah. And I think that's a piece of it maybe is it's just reverting to certain habits of performance maybe.
And just doing a thing that I think he didn't fully ever believe in. I don't think he truly wanted to play Radar the child, but of course that's the job. So that's what he's going to do. But it's not going to be as interesting. For his part, Mike Farrell, who played BJ Honeycutt, thought that Gary Berghoff, who played Radar, was the best actor on the show.
It is also fun, I will say, to watch Gary Berghoff on like Match Game because he's so different from you know the character.
He would show up on Match Game. He was the replacement for Charles Nelson Riley for a while on Hollywood Squares.
I mean, he was just the replacement for Charles Nelson Riley whenever Charles Nelson Riley was directing a Broadway show, basically.
Yeah. Hawkeye brings BJ over to Rosy's bar. We remember Rosy's bar from the previous episode where they gave Henry Blake his big send-off in the back room. There's just this knockdown brawl happening behind a paper wall. It's great. It's really funny. Reminds me of the Girl Scouts fighting in Airplane.
Yeah. Really well staged too, because like it's a very theatrical staging where they clearly blocked it all out. These guys are fighting all over the place behind them, occasionally even in front of them, and they're just not even paying any attention.
For people who have watched something more recent than MASH, it's like when they go to that drug den and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia and there's the two people fucking behind that like plastic tarp.
Well, it's funny too because BJ like clocks that the fight is happening, but he never stops the conversation to be like, hey, should somebody deal with that in the way that you'd expect? It's just like, no, when you're in a new situation like this and the two people you're with are not reacting to the thing that's happening in the background, you just kind of sit back and like accept that maybe that's just how things are done here. And I thought that was very well observed.
And meanwhile, Frank heads into the swamp, right, which used to be where he lived, but now that he's the commanding officer acting, he's in a different tent.
Right.
And also Trapper's gone, so they're throwing some stuff out. There's a nudist lifestyle mag that Klinger decides to stuff away in his own pocket. And Klinger's so surprised at all the different sports they play. He's like, I thought it was just volleyball. There's a very interesting pointed moment that maybe I'm reading too much into, but Frank picks up Trapper's hat, the big feathered straw hat, and he just sort of tosses it disgustedly out of the frame. And it feels to me, even though it's Frank doing it, it feels to me like this is the writers kind of going, fuck you to Wayne Rogers.
Well, and that's so...
Did you feel that at all? Or
I didn't remember.
It's such a small moment. It is such a, like, it just sort of happens. It's not emphasized at all, but it's like, I don't know, it feels a little nasty.
I buy it. I did not recognize it as the hat. I just thought that was another weird hat. That, knowing now that it was the Trapper hat, I totally buy that. But weren't like any of the people involved in MASH involved in Trapper MD at all? They would have to have signed off the rights, right?
Yeah, we can talk about Trapper John MD for a second here. So when Wayne Rogers left, his manager put out like this whole thing. I was able to find an article referencing it. I wasn't able to find the article itself, but it was in the Cincinnati Enquirer. His manager was like, yeah, I didn't want Wayne to keep doing this show where all he does is hand Hawkeye his martini glass and let Hawkeye make all the jokes.
Right.
These are two equally funny men who deserve equal billing or whatever. Again, the contract dispute may not have even been over that, but that's what the manager was going with for, you know, publicity's sake. And then Gene Reynolds, the producer of the show, frequently directed this episode. He came out with like, well, Alan Alda had been on Broadway multiple times, and we're so lucky to have him. Wayne Rogers, he acted every now and then, but he was mostly concerned with his business. Like, it was a little ugly there. And people read a lot into the Hawkeye, you know, how much more prominent he's become and things, as like a bad relationship between Wayne Rogers and the other actors. That was not true. You can see, I mean, shit, you can see Alan Alda at Wayne Rogers' funeral. There's like video of him giving this very touching eulogy. He and Loretta Swit, who played Margaret O'Houlihan, they went into business together.
Huh.
Oh, shit.
So the actors actually maintained a relationship with Wayne Rogers for the rest of their lives. At least certainly Alan Alda did and Loretta Swit. But like, this is one of those things where it's like show business. It starts to inflate the stories, right? It becomes Rashomon. It becomes like a bigger fuck you and disrespect and things here and there. And again, I think a lot of people want to blame certain things that they don't like from MASH on Alan Alda just because he's the most prominent face on the show.
Well, he also was part of the writing team. He was part of the directing team, right?
Yeah.
Like,
well, and a lot of people did. I mean, a number of the actors wrote. Mike Farrell also wrote some episodes and directed a bit as well. I mean, this happens on a lot of shows, right? Bryan Cranston directed a few episodes of Breaking Bad and things like that. You know,
at the end of the day, too, it does come down to the fact that Alan Alda is sometimes literally the guy who looks into the barrel of the camera and tells you what the point of the show is.
Yeah.
Yes.
When we're talking about Trapper John MD, we're talking about 20th Century Fox having this show. At the time that MASH was being made, Wayne Rogers said this, it was the only thing filming on the lot. They had this huge backlot and nothing else was there. He said his kids used to just ride their bikes around there and treat it like it was an abandoned neighborhood, you know?
Oh, hell yeah.
This was making a lot of money for them, whereas other things just weren't really happening for them. So by 1979, which importantly to 1979 is MASH is still running, but it's also started syndication at that point. They decided to do a spinoff called Trapper John MD. They get Pernell Roberts, who was best known as Adam on Bonanza. And he had quit TV a decade and a half before that and said, fuck TV. I hate TV so fucking much. And then finally, he was older. He needed the money and came back and did Trapper John MD. I've watched a little bit of this show now. You can't stream it anywhere, but it looks like every episode is on YouTube. And it's really bad. It's an awful, dreadful show. It ran for about 6 seasons. It is notable, however, for featuring one of the early roles for a young actor named Brian Mitchell in the credits. And for those of us who love Broadway musicals, that's Brian Stokes Mitchell to you.
What? How is it bad?
It's like Garth Marenghi's Dark Place.
Yes.
Like straight up. I sent a
earnest?
clip to AJ of a guy dressed for a costume party that like it just plays exactly like a Garth Marenghi scene. It's unbelievable.
Complete with actors who don't know how to like fully say lines.
Yeah, not good acting, not good writing, not good camera work, cheesy music.
Save for Brian Stokes Mitchell's perfect delivery.
Of course.
When asked by Trapper John,
Not
why
Trapper.
are you wearing... Oh, it's not. Who is that?
Trapper is the guy who says, I'm going dressed as a doctor.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know who that character is who's dressed
The
up in a
character
costume.
who's fully dressed up asks Brian Stokes Mitchell's character, why aren't you wearing a costume? To which Brian Stokes Mitchell replies, because costumes are dumb.
Yeah.
And the thing closes
That
on him.
deep
And it's
baritone.
like, yes! Yes, Stokes!
That's from an episode they do that is just a full-blown Satanic Panic episode. And it came out in 1981, so they were a little ahead of the curve.
Wait, so is it supposed to be serious? Like it's supposed to be a drama?
Yeah, I'd say maybe leaning a little bit more towards dramedy.
Okay.
Like not quite the dramedy stuff that we'd see in like the 90s, but maybe a little bit more in the vein of Saint Elsewhere.
Okay.
Sure. Saint Elsewhere being a much better show.
Sure.
But like this is just not on the same level of as MASH at all. The only connection it has to MASH is in the pilot episode where they show footage from the movie and TV series. And because they show footage from the movie, the producer of the movie, Ingo Preminger, Otto's brother, is actually able to sue and get a major portion of the rights from the TV show by officially declaring it a spinoff of the film.
Yeah, I mean, 6 seasons, that's some residuals money.
Oh, yeah.
If you could stream it anywhere.
Yeah, yeah. It did not have the syndication life that MASH had. And we'll talk about MASH's syndication in a later episode because that's an incredible story in itself. Yeah, this episode, as you can hear, I didn't grab a whole lot of clips from it. A lot of what it's got going on is very, very visual.
And it's mostly mechanical too, right?
Yeah.
Here's a new guy. He is going to replace Trapper John.
You can see how he's different from Trapper too, right? He, just like Trapper, has a wife and a daughter, but he's more straight-laced, right?
Yes.
He is a wife guy. And you can tell from even that episode that he's very sentimental.
He's not going to be fucking around with the nurses.
Yeah, no. Except for one episode, and it becomes the whole plot of the episode. Is that like, how the fuck did I do this?
Oh, no.
Yeah. This episode ends with a pretty great gag of Frank getting into the Jeep, not knowing that it's the stolen Jeep, and then he gets arrested by the MPs.
Yep.
Hawkeye and BJ are walking past, and Hawkeye says, well, I'd vouch for this man's character, but he has none. And Frank replies with, snot, snot, snot. And the credits roll as he presumably goes off to be court
And we get a teaser for the next episode
where Colonel Potter rolls in and Radar tells him to stick his horn in his ear because he's honking the Jeep's horn.
The next episode that we covered for this, which is Change of Command.
Yep. This one is also Fritzl.
The command changes in this episode, as it turns out. Yeah.
This one is also credited to Fritzl and Greenbaum, like the previous one. And yeah, this also feels like a premiere because it probably was initially written to be a premiere.
Sure.
And then they just had to just sort of switch out Trapper for BJ.
Because this is the character that they knew they would have to replace, of course.
Now Harry Morgan has moved in as Colonel Sherman T. Potter. And Harry Morgan he's an old guy. He was one of the original members of the group theater. So he was in stuff with Sanford Meisner and Lee Strasberg.
I'm glad to see it didn't fuck him up entirely.
Yeah,
that's what I'll say.
You didn't correct me, AJ.
Oh, what'd you say?
I said Strasbourg.
Oh, I don't give a shit about that man. I don't give a shit about that grooming motherfucker. Let that man burn and rot in the hell that he built for himself.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
You know what?
So, yeah.
I think Steven Strasburg, all-timer pitcher. I mean, like, at the end of the day, did he make the Hall of Fame?
No, he
but
personally insulted me at a function.
But I mean, he really was. He anchored the Nationals for a really long time. And like when people think about that era of the Nats, obviously, you're mostly thinking about Max Scherzer. Yeah. But they wouldn't have been as good during that period without for Strasburg. You know what I'm saying?
He was if you could really categorize him, he was a real golden boy, right? In the same way that Harry Morgan's Broadway debut was in the play Golden Boy. He had a sitcom in the 50s. You know, he bounced around. He did a lot of stuff. One of my favorite things that he ever did was in a movie that also had McLean Stevenson, Colonel Henry Blake. They were both in a movie together, produced by Walt Disney, a live action film that also featured, of course, the Walt Disney's mainstay, Dean Jones, Sandy Duncan, and the voice of Roddy McDowall. Roddy McDowall played the title character of
Shaggy D.A.
The Cat from Outer Space.
Yes!
This movie was 6-year-old Brian's favorite fucking movie, and I think it led to a lifelong obsession with Roddy McDowall for me. Roddy McDowall was also in the pilot for Trapper John MD. Hey-o!
Hey, you know what? If you want to hear more about Roddy McDowall, you can go listen to that episode of Have You Seen This? That we went on a couple years ago.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about It, but not
that's
that
what
one.
It's called. Yes, no, different one.
The other It. Yeah,
it was
that's
about,
a great episode.
Like Roddy McDowall creates and befriends a golem. We'll put the link down in the notes. It's a good episode. You should listen to it.
In this episode, Sherman Potter rolls up to the 4077, and he's regular Army. He served in World War I and World War II. He was in the cavalry. He was a regular horseman. I said he's a real man about horse.
Interesting that.
What's that sound? What? There is no sound. What the fuck? There's no sound. AJ, there's no sound. Where did the sound happen? Where's it
there's
going?
no horse. There's no horse.
Oh, there's just the idea of a horse. Fuck.
Oh, thank God.
There's a saddle, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
the saddle implies the existence of horse.
True.
But this isn't AJ's saddle corner.
No,
that's true.
It's not AJ's photo of horse corner.
Because that is... because that's what he has, right? He brings in the new commander, the new colonel. Sorry.
Yeah, there we go. He's a commanding officer.
Yeah, well, true. He's the CO, but he does have a horse obsession, and he has photos upon photos upon photos of beautiful horses.
A wall of horses.
It looks like it's like that. You know what it's like? It's like the drawing room in Blueprints.
Yes.
Yes, it is. I'm walking into the commanding officer being like, okay, how many legs? I just got to count the number of legs and then I can open the safe.
We have to count the gates. He also has a picture of his wife that is just Harry Morgan's real wife.
He kind of looks like J.K. Simmons. Am I the only one who thinks he looks a little like J.K. Simmons?
J.K. Simmons? Yeah, because he's a short man.
Tiniest J.K. Simmons.
Which plays very well for him as you know, an old man in this.
Right.
He was also on the 60s revival of Dragnet, where he was brought in to be the comic relief, because Dragnet very famously has no jokes.
Very dour show.
Very
and
dire,
as the comic
show.
relief, he said, I did Dragnet for so long, I don't know if I can do jokes anymore.
Which is really funny because Brian is also working his way through Frasier for the first time.
Yeah.
And when I told him that Marty Crane, Frasier's dad's favorite show, was Dragnet, Brian just knowingly nodded like, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. I've seen and listened to a lot of Dragnet, because it was also a radio show.
So I always forget it was a radio show, too.
Oh, I never forget. So that's what driving to Albuquerque with Brian's parents is like these days. They love turning on the old XM radio, old time radio drama station.
Hell yeah.
Just like me, for real. So,
did they ever listen to Adventures in Odyssey? This is actually a question. Since you both grew up with Adventures in Odyssey.
I made them listen to so much Adventures in Odyssey growing up.
It wasn't the other way around?
No, it was not the other way around. That's why I am who I am. I thought I've been clear about this the whole time.
No. This is fucked.
The show was never forced upon me.
We can't have this lore not in an Odyssey episode.
Well,
that's insane.
That's okay. This is our spinoff.
This is so
Brian
fucked.
Alford, MD.
Oh, no.
Yeah. No,
because costumes
it was
are
never
dumb, Brian.
once inflicted upon me. It was inflicted by me.
I need to go take a walk, maybe.
Anyway, so
Yes.
Frank, of course, he's been micromanaging everything, even the mess tent. He's shouting at Igor at the mess tent because he doesn't slop the food well enough to keep everything in its proper compartment.
Bean, bean, bean.
The guy who plays Igor, by the way, he has a MASH podcast. If you look up MASH podcast, you'll find his show.
Wow.
So Potter coming in, of course, means that Frank has to move back to the swamp. VJ and Hawkeye, they built this little bamboo bar. They have to tear it down. They're having a bad time. They're really worried about this fucking old man moving in, regular army. He's gonna stink up the joint with the military stuff. And of course, Harry Morgan had played a role in season 3 as an insane racist general who they have to kind of just drive totally nuts until he finally leaves. Once Potter's moving into his office, of course, we have Radar. At the very beginning, he's been sunbathing, then realizes the person honking at him is the new colonel, and he covers up his nipples with his arm. And he says, request permission to cover up my nakedity. It's just a great word. And as he's setting up the office, getting the horse pictures up and everything, Klinger comes in because he sees an opportunity.
Yeah.
Colonel Potter, sir.
In
Corporal
his
Klinger.
dress, his earrings.
I'm Section 8, head to toe. I'm wearing a Warner bra. I play with dolls. My last wish is to be buried in my mother's wedding gown. I'm nuts. I should be out.
Horse hockey. I've seen these dodges for 40 years, all the tricks. Knew a private pretended he was a mayor. Carried a colt in his arms for weeks. Another fella said he was a daisy. Insisted we water him every morning. No, Corporal. It ain't gonna go with me. Now you get out of that frou-frou and into a uniform. And you stay in uniform. Dismissed.
Radar, I'm finished. I gotta burn my bloomers.
We've seen how this camp has run before. We lean into the silliness. We're doing the booze. We're doing the womanizing. But now we have someone who's coming in who's supposed to be more army, more straight-laced.
Yeah. No pranks anymore.
No pranks, but he doesn't lack humor. Like, he doesn't lack warmth. Like, he's not coming in and imposing the fascism of Frank, right? He has his own very distinct personality, up to and including making horse puns, like horse hockey. And oh my God, what's that sound we hear galloping in the distance?
I hear it.
What is that?
Choppers.
AJ Hawks Corner. MASH edition. Settle down there. You'll get your turn.
Oh.
Yeah.
What the fuck is horse hockey? Like how would that even work?
I mean, I have an answer, but
would they wear two skates on their back legs and hold the stick with their hooved fronts? Or would they wear 4 skates and operate the stick with their long, long mouths? Ooh, I know which one I'd prefer.
I think I'd probably go with the latter, yeah.
Ooh, would there be a competitive league?
Yeah.
Like the NHHL? Would they wear uniforms or just little helmets so their ears wouldn't get chilly? Would there be a concessions horse hawking hay at halftime?
For sure, yeah.
Oh, that's not all he'll be hawking.
Wait, so it's horses watching the hockey. This isn't for the benefit of people?
He'll also be selling oats.
Oh, okay.
Ooh.
Okay, yeah, so horses watching.
Yeah.
Will there be a Canadian horse hockey player named Nane Gretzky? Will he go on to win the Mustangly Cup?
Oh,
there's only one thing we can say for sure. Me and Canadian horse hockey legend Nane Gretzky.
Yeah.
We're gonna puck. This has been AJ's Horse Corner MASH edition.
AJ's Horse Corner. MASH edition.
'Cause equicide is horses. It brings on life divorces. So please don't blow my horse up. Her name's Bree. I guess my horse's new name is Dapper.
AJ?
Yeah.
Tim Horston? You didn't do Tim Horston?
He's not a hockey player.
AJ, I need you to look up who Tim Horton was and what he did and what led to his... I thought
he was a coffee man.
Well, he was.
Both.
He's both.
He started by getting rich off of hockey.
Oh, man.
And then he
just
died drunk driving, which is the true Canadian pastime.
Oh, no.
Gordy Horse, Steve Nazerman. There were other options.
Okay, I don't know who
for
those
you.
are, but Tim Horston, that one matters.
All right, Canadians, drag AJ in the comments.
For what? I made a horse pun. It just wasn't your horse pun.
Well, not enough. I mean, you're going to talk about hockey.
You wanted me to name more horses?
I did. I wanted you to name
this to be longer?
I wanted you to name more horse hockey players. That's what I wanted.
So if you were rooting for the horse version of the Canadians, would you say go Nags go?
Yes.
Sydney Horsby.
I'll take your word for it, Josh. I don't know who these people are. This is a white man's sport. I would never touch it with a 10-foot pole.
I tried to do like a whole thing about puns on like hockey team names, but they're just like other animals.
Well, that's because you weren't aware, apparently, of Tim Horston. The second most famous Canadian after Raymond Massey.
And I would argue, Wayne Gretzky.
Don't know who that is.
For God's sake.
Seeing this episode, are you like, okay, so is he going to be more like of an obstacle for our main characters, or is he going to be more on their side like Blake was?
I figured it would kind of fall between, because he can't be a total hard ass. That's the point of Frank, you know? Well, not hard ass, but like he can't be a total oppositional figure.
Yeah.
This guy, and also this guy's been in the military long enough and has enough seniority and enough experience probably too in the medical field that he knows how to hang. But at the same time, he's not going to be checked out.
I feel like moderate obstacle is what I thought. But it's also the thing that like I also knew they wouldn't find it for a while necessarily because when these big transitions happen, it usually takes some time for the writers to like attune their writing to the particular actor who's playing that role. And I'm trying to think of like other examples of media where a long-standing figure is replaced by somebody else.
Yeah, where it's good, you mean? Yeah, it's hard. You don't see it a lot.
Unfortunately, it's Jack Allen is the first one that comes to mind, where he's just like, I'll never be Wit, but, you know, I don't have to be, even though Wit is very much alive in Israel right now.
Yeah, like other characters in sitcoms on TV, like I'm trying to think of those replacements that actually work really well. And I think that's one of the things that makes MASH stand out so much for me is that, like, it's not common. It's not common to have a new character come in, replace an old one, to have two come in at the same time and have it work incredibly well.
I would argue that New Girl actually pulls this off really well because they start with Damon Wayans and then he has to go and do a different show, Happy Endings, right? And then that show gets canceled and Damon Wayans comes back to New Girl a couple seasons later and then leaves and kind of comes and goes. And it's a nice little job for him. But Lamorne Morris replaces him. And for the first season and a half, they have no idea how to write for him because they knew how to write for Damon Wayans and they don't know what Winston Bishop's whole deal is. And once they figure it out, he's one of the best sitcom characters on television. Apart from the fact that he's a cop, like that's the big thing that like keeps him from being the best.
I've got one, and it's not a sitcom, but 7 of 9 replacing Kes on Star Trek Voyager.
Oh, for sure. I would also say when they replaced Riker, when Jonathan Frakes was replaced by Jonathan Frakes with a beard.
Yes, of course.
That will also happen to BJ Honeycutt on this series.
Oh, really? He'll get a beard?
After season 5, Alan Alda's like, what if he grows a mustache? And the writers were like, yeah, wait, Mike, what if you did grow a mustache? So he does.
And it changes
then a couple
the character?
seasons later, he grows an even longer mustache. It doesn't necessarily change him, but it does give him something distinct. It lets him stand out more than when he's clean shaven. Basically, every role that Mike Farrell has played, aside from BJ in the later seasons of MASH, has been clean shaven, though. I think he just doesn't like having facial hair.
Sure.
So Colonel Potter, he's not a total hard ass, but he's not that pushover that Blake was, right?
Right.
You can't run a scheme under his nose. And it feels less like he's there to be the new conflict of the series than he is to set up new rules. We're not going to be a show that does the big elaborate pranks anymore. We kind of ran out of those. So we're going to lean a little bit more into interpersonal stuff, comedy of manners, smaller scale pranks like we'll see in a couple episodes. And yeah, make it more of a medical drama. Make it a little bit more serious now. Because he's this old man, he's a very fatherly character, and they realize that one of the best buttons to push isn't so much the anger, which he does really well, but the moments of quiet with him, where he just cares very much about the people that work for him, you know, that work under him.
It also connects him to a longer lineage of war. Right?
Yeah.
The fact that this is a guy who fought in World War I and World War II and has seen everything. The character itself now grounds it in like, this thing that's happened in Korea has happened before and it's just happening again and again and again.
There's another episode, I think it's either The Interview or it's Deluge, the episode before that, which end this season, where he talks about how, you know, he got into war for the romanticism. He was in the cavalry. He rode a horse. He calls it the big one. And war just gets smaller and smaller after that. And in Korea, it's like, well, again, what is the point? Why are we here? Why are we doing this? The big thing with Hawkeye and BJ is that they are miscreants, but they're great surgeons. Or perhaps those things are comorbid, right? Because Frank is stuffy in business and psycho, and he's a terrible surgeon. Right. So they're like, we don't know about this regular army guy. He hasn't done surgery in a few years. We're going to keep an eye on him while we are in the OR and see if he's worth anything. Turns out he is. He's a very good surgeon.
Well, and not only is he good, it's like there's a moment here where he sort of has to prove that he is, because one of the patients is in a situation where things are a little bit touch and go, and he's able to provide, and it's the writing isn't entirely clear on what exactly is going on, but you know, he does the thing that he needs to do when he needs to do it, and he saves the patient.
Usually something to do with the peritoneum. There's a lot of, in just these episodes, it's like peritoneum. Another thing that's been going on is that because Frank doesn't get to be Big Boss anymore, he has decided that instead he will be Solid Snake. And he's dressed up in mud and branches, and he has run off AWOL and sleeping in the dirt, which is not the last time that this will happen either. So he is AWOL, and Margaret O'Houlihan knows this, and she has told Hawkeye, and he's kind of dancing around it. They don't want him to actually get in trouble. So finally he returns in the dead of night after living days in the mud. Or maybe just one day. So now Frank comes back, and he confides, of course, in the only person he can confide in, which is Major Hot Lips Houlihan.
Margaret, it's me, Frank.
Frank! Oh, Frank, my darling! Are you all right? Where have you been? What happened to you? I'm worried sick.
It was awful out there. All dark. I was hungry. A dog chased me and bit my duffel bag.
Oh, poor darling. What happened to your clothes?
I fell down.
Oh, there.
Oh, it's so good to be home.
Oh.
Did anybody miss me?
I did, sugar.
But what about the Colonel and Pierce and Honeycutt? Did they even care? Were they upset?
Of course they were.
Margaret, I know this isn't the time to ask.
Ask, darling.
But after stumbling around in the dark, and here you are all warm and loving.
Ask, Frank, ask.
Have you got any cookies?
So full baby.
Yeah.
Full baby.
And you can see this is still the old Margaret. This is still, they've given her a couple of episodes where she gets to be more of a person, but she still sort of rubber bands, snaps back into being this horn dog psycho who just cannot resist the sexual powers of Frank Burns.
Republican Harley Quinn.
Yeah.
Sure. And I like it. I actually do. I think that there is something about this that feels very real, that they like match each other's freak.
Yeah, it is very winning. And, you know, a lot of that is just the chemistry between these two actors, clearly.
They can both become cartoon characters together.
And they can both become nude.
They can. They don't.
Not frequently.
Because it's, you know, television, but yeah.
I'm not saying they can become nude in front of us. I just mean like in general.
Most people can.
You're not wrong.
Well, every time you turn away from an episode of MASH, they do become nude. And you turn back, all their clothes go back on.
That's crazy.
But, yeah.
So we go straight from that cookies line into the swamp. And Colonel Potter is drinking up some of that moonshine with Hawkeye and BJ. And they're having a great time singing World War I songs.
There's a long, long night of waiting until my dreams all come true. Till the day when I'll be going down that
Good harmonies.
Yeah, no, they're good singers.
with you. To Blackjack Pershing, inventor of 21. To Montgomery Ward and his orchestra. To Harry Truman.
To Bess Truman. Margaret Truman.
To Heiress Truman.
I love that line. Fuck you.
But if you boys generate a little more heat, wrap a little tinfoil around the top, you'll get a better yield. And you land in jail.
And his orchestra.
I had a still on Guam in World War II. One night it blew up. That's how I got my Purple Heart.
He does the drunk acting really, really well.
They all do.
Yeah.
Like, it's so good. We get to see it a little bit later with Alan Alda, but like what's remarkable about it is how much time they let it sit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the thing about MASH in general is that they aren't afraid of the silences in between lines.
Yeah.
It's not, we need this many jokes per page. They have more than enough jokes per page, and they know that, so they're allowed to let air breathe and let these character moments really sit and really sing.
And they become less reliant on the laugh track as well,
Yeah.
in a way that is really nice. Like, it just doesn't feel as forced anymore.
Yeah.
It's more assured.
They're very comfortable playing certain gags without it, which I'm sure always took them having to like twist somebody's arm in a booth, being like, don't fucking turn the knob on the laugh track. That's basically how this episode ends. They're chilling. We get to the sense of like, this is going to be a little bit more of a family than they were, than they thought it was going to be under Potter. So season 3, the previous season, when McLean Stevenson left and they killed off Colonel Henry Blake, that show ended at the #1 spot in the ratings.
Wow.
Season 5 starts without being in the top 20 at all.
Wow.
The network was so sure of MASH's success that they moved it to Friday from its original Tuesday slot.
Oh, fuck yeah.
And it didn't work. And plus they're replacing 2 actors. Of course, Mike Farrell was like, great, now my career is going to die because I'm going to be the guy that killed MASH.
Oh, God.
So 15 episodes out of this season don't break the top 20.
Wow.
That's most. And the show ends up 10 episodes in, moving back to Tuesday. And it's able to sort of stabilize in the ratings in, hitting like 16. I think the highest it gets is like 12.
I mean, huge by today's standards.
Yeah.
Like, if you hit those numbers,
yeah. I mean,
in the year of our Lord 2025,
in terms of like
cooking.
the number of people tuning in, it doesn't look anything like TV today. In season 5, however, once it's stabilized, once they have the time slot business figured out, there is only 1 episode in the next season that doesn't rank. And that is because it is up against Roots. It is the week that Roots is airing. And for people who don't know, when Roots aired on TV, right, this was the miniseries era. There were big miniseries that had Helter Skelter, V, The Thornbirds, Shogun, whatever. Roots was the top rated, highest viewed narrative TV program up until that point.
It was huge. It was a huge cultural phenomenon.
And I think it remains the biggest miniseries ever. If I'm not mistaken.
Definitely the biggest miniseries.
Yeah.
So that one week where everyone was watching Roots, that was the week that that one episode of MASH didn't break into the top 20 in season 5. But yeah, season 4 was this kind of, are we going to make it kind of year. So aside from that, mostly top 10, and it gets more successful as it goes along, right? It has its best ratings in season 11.
Wow.
So
that's unheard of.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It defies all show business logic, basically, the way that MASH worked out. Season 4 ends with Larry Gelbart leaving. He does these 2 really great episodes. One is called Deluge, which is a little bit more Robert Altman than what they've been doing in the recent years. So Deluge combines vignettes from the MASH unit, lots of monologues in that one. It's a really good episode. With newsreel footage from the time. And so you're seeing all these different news stories of like, the Aga Khan getting married. There's some fighting breaking out with the Viet Minh as a great little foreshadowing to the present when the show was written. And the final episode of season 4 is something called The Interview, which I would have loved to cover this time around, but there was just too much to cover already. And I'm going to do an episode just about MASH's experimental form-breaking episodes, because this one is a stone-cold classic, shot entirely in black and white, and done as a news report that is just talking head interviews with the characters from the 4077. Again,
hell yeah.
We'll get to it somewhere down the line because I do really want to talk about it. That was Larry Gelbart's last episode. You know, he was still living in the UK, right? So, you know, you're devoting 6 months or so of your life to working on MASH. So he's coming to not just to the US, but all the way to the West Coast and then back to the UK where his family is living all this time. And so he was like, okay, I'm finished. I'm done writing the show. Let some new talent come in. And so season 5 is before they have a new like permanent set of showrunners. Those guys will take over in season 6, but it's the first season without Larry Gelbart. However, I think it maintains the tone of season 4 rather well.
Yes.
And we're going to look at season
well.
5 after this break and specifically look at what it is doing with Major Frank Burns and Major, not Hot Lips, but Margaret O'Houlihan. So we'll see you in a few minutes.
Hey listeners, Ellie Phillips here, AJ's spouse and a person who has fierce opinions about the new reality show Destination X. Okay, so the ads for Destination X make it seem like it's like a puzzle game where you really need to know things. So in the first episode, when I found out that Rick was a birder, I was like, fuck, this guy has it all figured out because he's going to be able to identify the birds. But they don't even let them all out every time. So Rick can only use his birding knowledge every once in a while. Instead, it's a deeply social game, which I do find fascinating, but I feel like they could have played that up a little bit more in the marketing materials. Anyway, it's another MASH episode, which means I have the unenviable task of asking you all to take it easy on AJ's Alan Alda impression. Again, it's not like he hasn't been practicing. He has. He won't stop practicing. He's walking around the apartment 24/7, calling everything terrific and scolding me about how war is bad. Does he think I don't know what war is? I know what war is. It's bad. And that would be, you know, all well and good, but he keeps asking me if I knew that he had polio when he was 7 and how his dad's name is Alfonso Giuseppe Giovanni Roberto d'Abruzzo, which is a true fact about Alan Alda's father, which also kind of feels like an Italian hate crime, and I don't know. I'm starting to think that maybe AJ thinks he is Alan Alda. There are nights when I catch him staring out the window, mumbling to himself about how he was on the blacklist in Ray Donovan, the gritty reboot of Everybody Loves Raymond. But then he'll whisper something about how strange it is to grow old, to feel your body betray you in such small ways until it eventually devours itself. How your brain still thinks it's young and thriving, but how the image in the mirror betrays it every time. How to live a life is to live through a series of constant upheavals, never knowing when the next one will strike, only certain in the knowledge that it will. Then he'll stop and turn to me and say, "But how lucky am I to have had my youth captured on screen? The ghost of me getting to live on with all my friends gone too soon, forever trapped in the purgatory of a sitcom, sure, but together, playing pranks, saving lives, making each other laugh. And ain't that just terrific?" And then I'll say, "Yeah, Alan, it does sound terrific." And he'll ask me if I know war is bad. And I know war is bad. I know. So the point is, I'm really worried about AJ, so please just be kind to him, or I will personally ask Jeffrey Dean Morgan to throw you on his murder bus. It's not a murder bus. AJ hasn't seen Destination X. I keep asking him to watch it with me, but he won't. And now, without further ado, another message from Alan Alda.
I'm Alan Alda! Poopity scoopity!
One thing Wayne Rogers didn't want to do when he stopped playing Trapper was get typecast as a military guy or as a doctor.
Sure.
So his next big TV show that he did was called, what's this? House Calls.
Ah, shoot.
Oh, no.
It actually started up
again.
around the same time as Trapper John MD. I don't know if he was ever... People say that he was asked for Trapper John MD and turned it down, but he already was doing House Calls. So I don't think that's true. And House Calls was also, talk about being typecast, a spin-off of a movie called House Calls, starring Walter Matthau that had come out the year before.
And what a cultural impression it's made.
Yeah, clearly.
Zero
Have
whatsoever.
you watched it?
No, you can't even find it. Even like you can find one episode on YouTube in 10-minute blocks. That's how long ago it was uploaded.
Wow.
Interestingly enough, the movie that it's based on was co-written, and I think the show itself, by Julius Epstein of the Epstein brothers. Casablanca. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, no one remembers it. The main thing that show is known for was Lynn Redgrave getting fired off of it for having a child.
Oh, fuck.
So it didn't last long after they got rid of Lynn Redgrave.
Right.
Well, serves them fucking right.
Yeah. It made it like maybe 2-3 seasons, 50 episodes. So it didn't hit the usual syndication mark and has died in obscurity. You know, people say they don't write them like they used to when it comes to TV. And in some ways that's true. But again, it's the stuff that was worth watching that typically lives on. Like Wayne Rogers, whenever he'd do like a guest appearance, it would be on like Diagnosis Murder as another doctor. But again, his main thing by the later decades was his business stuff. And so he probably had more TV appearances on Fox Business Channel than he did on any scripted program. As we go into season 5, I want to mention two guys, one of whom I already did mention because of his blog, but I want to keep them in the back of our head. We don't actually have any episodes today that were written by these two men, but I have to bring them up for reasons that will be clear soon. So these two guys are Ken Levine and David Isaacs. These are two very successful writers. If you look up Ken Levine and or David Isaacs, you're going to
find his
together.
famous game BioShock.
BioShock,
yes.
System Shock 2, and even some of the beginnings of Thief.
Wow.
So Ken Levine and David Isaacs were always a team. They met in the Army Reserves. They wrote a couple episodes of The Jeffersons, and their manager changed companies and ended up working at the same agency as Gene Reynolds' manager. Oh. So they were like, oh shit, that's the MASH guy.
Oh, you're saying they moved on up.
They moved on up to a different television show. Yes. These two guys, they were like, well, we were in the Army Reserves. We know a little bit about the military. We could pitch some things. Well, so they had an initial meeting and they were like, okay, come back after the weekend with your pitch idea. Usually, at least in the 70s, the idea of a pitch is 3 episodes. Got 3 ideas, right? Radar's going to do something. Klinger's going to do something. Hawkeye's going to do something, whatever. They wrote 50.
Yeah.
Wow. In a weekend.
That's how you get the job.
That's how you get the job, or that's how you get your ass spanked over the desk and then you never work again. And they got the first one. They did not get their asses spanked over the desk.
You know, when you are asked, this is sort of a maxim in like TV writing, but if you are asked by a showrunner, what could we do to fix the show?
Yeah.
Like, what would you do to fix the show? You always answer honestly, because when you're in that meeting and they're looking for a new writer, it's usually because they need like a new voice to help.
Because there's something that isn't working. Yeah.
So, and it's, a lot of people's first time, they're just like, oh, no, I wouldn't change anything. It's so great. It's perfect. And they're just like, you won't get that job. Right. You have to be honest. But again, if you're too honest, then you get bent over the table and spanked. So again, it's a delicate balancing act, this whole thing.
Anyway, Levine and Isaacs, I think they prioritized 3 out of that 50 because they end up getting 3 episodes in season 5. The first one is an episode called Out of Sight, Out of Mind, where Hawkeye gets temporarily blinded. And there's a great B plot involving Frank betting on baseball games. And they do a whole fake baseball broadcast in order to screw him over. That's important because these two men who, again, if you just look at their credits and you realize these men have a fucking fantastic run as sitcom writers because they end up becoming the showrunners of MASH starting in season 6. Then they start writing for Cheers.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Then they start writing for a spinoff of Cheers called Frasier.
Yep.
And then they write for Wings. Actually, Wings might be before Frasier.
It would have to be before Frasier.
Either
Wings
way,
is before Frasier, yeah.
Another great show. And then Becker. which I haven't seen, but I hear it's good.
Here's the thing. Everyone's sleeping on Becker. I think we gotta watch some Becker.
You like Becker, AJ?
We?
Yeah. No, we. We're gonna have a new sub-series called Bennett Like Becker, and we're gonna rock the house.
The many eras of Becker. Are you a big Becker head, AJ?
I've seen exactly half an episode of Becker. It was fine. Ted Danson's so charming.
Yeah,
that's a thing.
Ted Danson.
He's just a curmudgeon.
These two men together wrote 2 episodes of The Simpsons as well. Golden Age Simpsons.
Fucking hell.
Which we're talking about season 2, episode 5, Danson Homer.
Oh my God. That's the baseball one, right?
It's the
that's
baseball
Homer at the bat.
It also should be noted that Ken Levine was a baseball announcer for many, many years as well.
Oh, there you go.
They also wrote Saturdays of Thunder in season 3, which is the soapbox derby one.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah. So anyway, that's just a little insight into those two guys. And now we're going to talk about a bunch of episodes they didn't fucking write. So
Damn it. I've been misled. Fuck.
This season also, I think, is the first that has Linda Bloodworth-Thomason as a writer. She ended up becoming the showrunner and creator of Designing Women.
Oh, shit.
So a very successful writer in her own right. And she's able to write episodes like The Nurses that have a little bit more of a focus on the not men
ladies
in the show.
Yeah, and I got to watch that episode too as we were kind of deciding which episodes to do for this episode. That was a lot of episodes in a row.
A lot of episodes that's been dancing around in my head the last week too, yeah.
But it's a lovely half hour, and it's just strictly for time that we don't have time to talk about it. But go watch it. Seriously.
I had a number of episodes that I was like, I want to talk about all these, and I was like, AJ, can you watch some of these and let me know if any of these are vital or not?
Yeah, and I think what we've landed on here for this season 5 arc is really good for pretty much everyone involved, but specifically for Frank and Margaret.
Yeah. And speaking of Margaret, Loretta Swit died a month ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As we are recording this, she was in her late 80s.
Yeah.
She always was showing up on the podcasts and doing the little TV appearances every now and then. Alda wrote something very touching about her on Twitter.
This is really sweet. I actually just want to read this real quick. The Alda post. Loretta was a supremely talented actor. She deserved all her 10 Emmy nominations and her 2 wins. But more than acting her part, she created it. She worked hard in showing the writing staff how they could turn the character from a one-joke sexist stereotype into a real person with real feelings and ambitions. We celebrated the day the script came out, listing her character not as Hot Lips, but as Margaret. Loretta made the most of her time here.
Yeah, I mean, when we think about the movie and think about the character as played by Sally Kellerman, who just had nothing to do, who was just a stick in the mud, who very suddenly just becomes the cheerleader at the end. In the book, she's barely a character at all. And in the TV show, she's sort of like Frank. She's sort of a one-note villain who they sometimes have these absolutely wretched plots to destroy by getting her sexually assaulted and things like that.
Yeah.
And that is almost unrecognizable to this season of the show.
Absolutely. And also, I read this tidbit too, but she and Alda are the 2 actors who are both in the pilot and the finale of MASH.
Yeah.
They are only 2.
They are the 2 who make it all the way from the beginning to the end.
She does miss some episodes here and there,
including the one I mentioned just before the break, the interview, the end of season 4. For some reason, she's not in that one.
Because Alda is in every episode, right?
Yeah, that man had a job and he loved doing it.
Because there is an episode in season 4 that's just him. None of the other main cast. It's him and some of the Korean day players that they have, and I think if people have a problem with MASH, it's probably because of that episode, because it feels very much like this weird Alda ego trip. He didn't write that one, but it is just like he monologues the entire episode to this Korean family while suffering from a head injury. And it's the one that I think most strains your tolerance of Alda.
Sure.
Wow.
As we get into this season, we're not starting with the season premiere of season 5. It's fine. It's another extra long episode where they actually make the surgical hospital mobile. They bug out, they go somewhere else, and then they come back.
Oh,
great. TV. And now
location shooting.
We start the second episode and Margaret is on leave. She's hanging out in Tokyo. She's having a good time. And she calls in and she says, well, I've got some news. So no one knows what this news is. Frank is pretty certain. she's finally gotten me that promotion. I'm going to become a lieutenant colonel.
And he preps for it.
Yeah. Oh, he preps for it. He covers himself in powder. I mean, that's more just for his, I guess, sexual escapades.
Everybody loves a well-powdered man.
But anyway, Margaret comes in a Jeep, and BJ and Hawkeye are there to greet her.
The Fighting 4077. Somehow it's not the same place I left.
You've been gone a while. It's a Howard Johnson's now. Driver, take this Jeep down to the stalls and give it a good rub down.
Oh, understand you brought good news from Tokyo.
Oh, BJ! Hawkeye is too good to be true.
And it can't be Frank's promotion.
No.
Frank's demotion?
Really? It's the best of all possible newses.
Hey,
now do you know?
How best? The Big Ben best?
Uh-huh.
Best dress best?
Uh-huh.
The war's over.
Think big!
Margaret, we give up.
Okay, sit down.
Okay.
Sit down.
Sit down. Sitting.
Here it comes.
Okay, all right.
I'm engaged to be married.
Yeah.
That's it? That's the big news?
Oh, silly, the ring.
What ring? Oh, there is a ring there. Oh. That must have cost a pretty penny.
At least.
It's a small gem, and everyone makes fun. Potter has to put his glasses on to see it.
Right.
Margaret is now engaged to be married to a man named Donald Penobscot, a name you will hear 1,000,000 times in season 5.
Something that I find very impressive, and you can hear it just in that little bit, is how quickly and naturally the new actors were able to just slot right in.
Yeah. I guess it must have just spoken to the performance that Mike Farrell was putting on in previous series, that they were already thinking of him, and they were right. Like, he just fits. He's just there and he works. You know, with Harry Morgan, he had been on the show before in a different role. So they were like, okay, yeah, we already know the kind of chemistry that he's going to be able to bring in. But it feels effortless.
Yeah. And Potter too. I mean, Potter's not in that clip, obviously, but it's same thing. He's just right in there.
The writers knew how to bend the universe to the new actors.
Because there's the scene that you didn't play the clip of course, where, you know, Margaret is talking to Potter on the phone, and you can already tell that he sort of has an intuitive understanding of what her bullshit is and vice versa.
Yeah.
Yeah. He tells her to cheer up, even though she's been scream laughing the entire phone call. But also the way that this episode sort of introduces this idea that, like, she has this big news, but she can't tell it here, so she has to come back to do it. And when she finally reveals it, it's the biggest nothing burger to most of the people in MASH, except for one person to which it is everything. And that is, of course, Frank Burns, who is himself married. Let us not forget, he has a wife at home.
He has a child at home.
He is too much of a coward to divorce her because all of his property is in her name.
Yes. This is the core of who Frank Burns is. He's a happily married man who is happily fucking Margaret O'Houlihan on the side. And she, you know, she's the one with less power in that relationship, in part because she's a woman, but also in part because she doesn't have the secure foundation of her own marriage to fall back on. She's single.
Well,
you know,
she's about to get the biggest chin in show business. I'll tell you that right the fuck now.
So, as we said before, Frank Burns is just covered in powder. He is fluffing himself up. He is ready to go plow Margaret O'Houlihan and become a lieutenant colonel or whatever. And he makes this little noise here that I just had to capture. This is the song Back in the Saddle Again, as performed by Larry Linville as a chicken. This is a sound I have probably heard every single day of my life that I have lived with my father. He makes, this is like a stim for him, like at least once a day. Maybe since this episode aired. So for about 50 years, he has gone bark, 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 bark.
Good. That's incredible.
Yeah.
For my dad, that's 2 youths from my cousin Vinny.
That's a good dad stim.
Oh yeah.
That's a
Josh hit us with the dad stim.
I don't know that I have one. I wish I could. I can't think of one that my dad.
Well, it doesn't have to be your dad necessarily. It could just be a stim of yours that you recognize as fatherly.
He what?
That's the worst.
That's the worst one.
Yeah.
No.
Because at least, you know, people have watched MASH and they might recognize the balking like a chicken thing. 2 youths, everyone knows, but a random Adventures in Odyssey quote.
I feel like if two Worst of All Possible Worlds fans, two worsties, come across.
Is that what we're calling them? We have a name finally.
The two worts.
I don't know. I mean, the past couple times I've done lead-ins, I've been like, "Hey, worsties."
I love worsties. I think I came up with worsties.
I don't know. Let us know.
It sounds moist.
Let us know because it's also like it's like besties. You know, it connects to the whole thing. I don't know. Let us know what you think in the comments about that too. After you're done upbraiding AJ for not knowing anything about hockey.
I made a good pun.
You could have made a better one.
I throw myself on the mercy of the court. I made a good pun.
But the best way for two worsties to identify each other in the wild, there needs to be some sort of a phrase, right? So it's like
that's one person, Narwhal baconing at midnight.
So like if one person says he what does the response to that need to be?
They do my reversed auto-tuned he what. T-Roy. Or they can go.
What about
we're bringing MASH back.
He what? I'm cool, Voltaire.
If I swear to God,
don't do this.
If it's
None of you do this.
Don't do this.
If you run into a fellow worstie at the Tim Hortons,
yes,
don't do this,
dude. Don't do this unless you want to be cringe.
Yeah. And sometimes maybe you want to be cringe. I guess.
If you are the Tim Hortons looping your dick onto your back.
Oh my God. Anyway, they get this like meeting in the mess tent and they're talking about, what she was up to and everything. And Frank enters late. He is not aware of the ring yet. Because again, we've established it's kind of small. The first thing that he gets in this conversation with Houlihan is that she mentions that he almost killed a patient.
Yes, Colonel. About 3 weeks ago, one of our patients, a Lieutenant Turvey, required emergency surgery in Tokyo. Apparently, the MASH surgeon removed part of the colon without exteriorizing. The patient later developed peritonitis.
And which of us was responsible for that?
Oh, it was Major Burns, sir.
Well, that's one on me.
Well, he's certainly being a good sport about it.
What do you have to say for yourself, Burns?
Colonel, exteriorizing takes time. I'm a busy man. I got things to do. I'm sorry.
Major Burns, he nearly died.
Well, I said I'm sorry. You don't have to make a federal case out of it.
There it is. Now on, it's strictly by the book. This happens again, it goes on your record.
Okay. I thought this was going to be a fun meeting.
So he learns about the engagement. Everyone braces for impact.
Right.
And then he takes it very well. And then as he's walking out of the mess hall, he turns into Lou Ferrigno, painted green, and he tears the doors off.
It's really good. It's a great...
It's so good.
It's really good just comedic acting where you can tell... This happens a lot with Frank, where you can already tell what's coming. Mm-hmm. What you don't know is how he's going to do it.
Yeah.
And every single time, Larry Linville makes a choice that's just a little different from what you're expecting, and it works every time.
Yeah, he's so nasty. He's so good.
He's so good at being nasty, but also you don't ever fully hate him. And that is an accomplishment, a feat of acting.
But you also you want to hate him. You want to keep him around because you want to see just how many ways he can be harmed, because that's also very, very fun. As we see, like, Houlihan just keeps talking about Donald fucking Penobscot. They're in surgery and she is just going on and on about how tall he is, how he has to sling his penis over his back. So she keeps talking about Donald as she's helping Frank with someone that he's doing surgery on, and then he stabs her.
Right.
And then like this part's a little funny to me. We're like, Hawkeye scolds Margaret Houlihan for not being sensitive enough to ferret face. Yeah. It's like, okay, whatever. We'll move on from there. Not that important, I guess. But this is another thing is it's like, Alan Alda gets kind of scoldy. And if you ever watch like 4 Seasons, the movie that he made with Len Cariou, it's like he's just scolding everyone the whole time. It's just like a preachy Woody Allen movie.
I mean, well, and again, when we talk about the things that people find irritating about Alan Alda performances, I think this is the thing.
Thankfully, this scene is short and we get to move on because Frank goes completely insane.
Yeah.
He has already been getting increasingly paranoid over the last season or so, where he accused a local family of digging bombs underneath the camp. And it turns out that they were just digging a hole to bury their kimchi in. And here he has kidnapped yet another farming family, maybe the same one as the one previously. And
he fully goes commando, and I'm not talking about the underwear. Like he
well, it could be.
I mean,
it could be.
Turns out Margaret's the only one who wears boxers in the whole camp.
Yeah, we learned that. He camouflages himself, and he really tries to like fully mask up. And I don't mean mask as in wearing a mask. I mean becoming more masculine.
Yes.
Which is also very fun.
Frank has marched an entire family and their yak into the camp at gunpoint. It's not a yak, it's a bull. And then he decides to hold the officers at gunpoint. Radar or Klinger. No, it's Klinger. Klinger has taken the family and gotten them to the mess tent and gotten them whatever food they wanted because Frank just committed a war crime against an ally.
Right.
Yes. So yeah, Burns is just completely off his nut.
But he just so desperately wants to be a hero. He needs to. You certainly are not on his side here, obviously, but you can understand from the perspective of his character why he is doing it. This is grounded in something that makes sense for who he is.
This war has to mean something, and it means nothing. It's the Korean War. It means nothing. And he's been able to hide from that because he gets to plow this really hot blonde lady.
Right.
And now he doesn't get to do that anymore.
Right.
He doesn't get to engage in any of his fantasies. And he doesn't get to be the combat soldier that he tells people back home that he is. So he decides, whatever, I'm going to kill some South Koreans.
Because it was that, and it was of course also being commanding officer. That too has been stripped from him now.
And the only way that he is able to come back down to Earth is to escape into a different fantasy that Radar is able to provide.
Yeah. So
by calling
Radar,
up his mom.
Yeah, Radar comes up and he's like, you have a call waiting for you. Just come out into my office. And he leaves and Radar's like, oh, wait, I can watch them for you. And he takes the gun, right? Frank hands him the gun and he's like, oh, thank God. So they listen in on the phone call while Frank picks up and finds out who it was that's talking to him.
Oh, this is Major Frank Burns. Who's this? Mommy who? Oh, my mommy. Hi, Mom. Well, I'm fine, Mom. No, I'm not. Well, nobody likes me here. You know, as usual. I don't want to talk about it. Well, you see, I had this friend. And this friend, just pretended to like me, you know? The way Dad used to.
He's crying.
Catharsis.
Gesundheit. Phone call couldn't have come at a better time, Radar. Nice work, Radar.
Thanks. I figure sometimes a guy's just got to talk to his mom.
Well, you're right, Mom. What do I care? I can always find a new friend. Yeah. I am kind of sleepy.
He's been awake for 48 hours straight.
Look at that pussycat.
Can you get him back to the swamp?
Do we have a choice?
Come on, Frankie. Time for Betty Bye.
Mom, can I have a glass of water?
Sure, Frankie. If you're a good boy, Mom will read you another chapter about Eeyore and Piglet.
And Tigger?
Yeah, Tigger.
So what we've seen so far, Margaret is introduced in this episode, or introduced back into the camp. She was in that phone call earlier. She's chatting it up with Hawkeye and BJ. They're getting along. She's a different person than she was at the start of this show.
Where she was just a frigid bitch, basically.
Yeah. Just a screaming psycho freak with terrible hair.
Yeah.
And now her hair is great. And Frank is also different than he was at the beginning. But he's far less respectable and he's far less real. He is more and more of a ridiculous sitcom character in a show that's becoming more grounded and more serious. Weirdly, it works.
Yeah.
But it probably wouldn't have been able to work much longer.
Right. And it certainly was not working in terms of just the getting satisfaction out of it perspective for Larry Linville, who decided not to re-up his contract at the end of season 5.
Yeah. Like, I understand why the writers would continue writing this stuff for him, though, because he's just so good at it. However, at some point, you probably do just feel like, okay, everyone else is getting to do more interesting stuff. Alan Alda does an episode where he just monologues and I'm not even there. And I'm just doing this same thing over and over and over again. It's really funny, but I do understand as an actor how that could become frustrating.
Unless you're like, say, Kenan Thompson, and you're the kind of actor who's totally okay with doing the same thing over and over and over again and actually finds a
stable job.
I think I am that kind of actor.
Yeah,
I'm totally happy.
You definitely
doing
are.
Shit. Like, you know, like there was like that one guy who like has the whip in Phantom of the Opera who was like there for the whole run. I could be that guy. I'm like,
or the
cool,
one
that's
bass
just-
baritone munchkin in Wicked. You know, and Brian, it's so funny because I am the opposite of that. I
need to move on. Yeah.
I did need to move on. You know, Puffs ran for, I think, another year or 2 years after I left the show because it got to the point where like I did not want to keep doing the show past the point where I started to resent the show.
Yeah.
Or I wasn't having fun doing the show anymore. And I know that's sort of like, it's
you
very different for TV.
You also did not have a union contract for that show, which doesn't help, right? You weren't getting paid a ton of money and you weren't getting health insurance.
It's different on a sitcom, obviously, because you have different storylines, you get a different script every week, and you're being given stuff, right? And you're not just doing the same thing over and over and over again. But if you are being given the same kind of stuff,
right,
over and over and over again, I could see how it could feel very much
it's
the same.
just,
And so
the
I
same
completely
trick. I turn my voice high. I do the little stupid smile. I do the
think,
mommy thing.
As is often the case, I find myself somewhere between the two of you where like, I think that I can keep doing different shades of the same thing for a while as long as I can find something novel in there.
Yeah,
sure. At least 50.
But what? True. But at some point, it does become like, what's the next thing?
Yeah.
Because I never want to stay in the same place for too long either.
Yeah.
So Josh and I are retiring from this podcast.
That's right. Yeah.
Brian, good luck.
It's now going to be a solo show hosted only by Brian.
And of course, doing a sitcom for 11 years is about doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For 11 fucking years. And the only change, I mean, like they even use the same theme song, the same footage from the pilot, even though no one dresses like that anymore with the Hawaiian shirts. But they throw in 2 new shots of Mike Farrell, you know, instead of Wayne Rogers.
You think about like, we've been doing our show now for over 4 years.
Yeah. And Wayne Rogers left our show, you know,
that's right,
pretty messily after the 3rd year.
No, but think about it seriously. Like
Scrap Daddy MD is doing really well, I hear, actually.
We had, but like cast members of MASH leaving after about 3 years, leaving about after 5 years. There is a point at which if the thing that you're doing doesn't feel like enough, you're going to want something more. And obviously I feel very fortunate that with our show, we're able to keep kind of doing and trying new things, which is what keeps me on board and engaged and excited. That and my fans. I love my fans.
Worsties.
So we move on now to episode 8 of season 5, Dear Sigmund. I forgot how good this episode was. This is
so
truly
fucking
one of the
good.
best. There are a lot of letter episodes. Either Hawkeye is writing to his dad, that happens a few times, or it's Radar writing back home, or it's BJ. It's usually, you know, someone is writing to a family member, a wife, or whatever. But Sidney Freedman, the psychiatrist that we have met before on this series, he's a little bit different. So he's writing a letter to Sigmund Freud, who has been dead for 11 or so years at this point. So, you know, this is more of a mental exercise than an actual letter. But these letter episodes are always a great excuse to just do small stories, just a series of little vignettes, not done in the Robert Altman style where they kind of weave together. This is all very structured, right? This whole show is very, very structured now in the way that it wasn't at the beginning.
I've always been interested in the epistolary format, and I actually
listen to this fancy guy here. I've always been interested in the epistolary format.
The epistolary is stored in the balls.
It's very true.
And my favorite example might, in fact, be the Italian novella.
Oh my God.
Fosca, upon which the famed Ettore Scola film was based, and of course Stephen Sondheim and James Lapine's musical, which
I believe it's pronounced Lapine.
So horribly misunderstood.
You are so lucky that we're not in the same room right now.
90s.
I would have dead ass like throttled you already, but
just do it. I'll come.
Is that a promise?
It's a threat.
And be careful, it's coming from over his shoulder, so you got to dodge it.
It's like in Wanted when they curve the bullets.
When I was back in Michigan most recently, my dad, it turns out, had this like USB drive full of old shit that I wrote when I was in like 7th grade and around then. I took a stab at a full-on epistolary novel.
Hell yes.
Like, there are like narrative chunks, but it's mostly transcripts of like notes being passed around between kids, instant message conversations, emails, that sort of thing.
Oh, hell yeah.
And it is unlike The Hidden Enemy, which I think is pretty standard for something written by somebody of that age. I actually think it's pushing
not
bad. It's not bad.
And you know what? Here's the thing. Now we have interstitial content for the next like 20 years. So thank you. Make my job super easy.
So yeah, speaking of the epistolary format, right? We've opened on this poker game where they find out that Margaret wears boxers and no one else does, apparently. There have been a few episodes in the past, and there will be a few more in the future, where Hawkeye goes nuts. These are usually the big Sidney Freedman episodes. Other than like, there's another episode where Quo Vadis, Captain Chandler, where there's a patient who thinks he's Jesus. They always find an excuse to bring in Alan Arbus wherever they can.
He's a great actor. I can see
he's
why.
He's fucking great.
And so Hawk's nightmare happens around this era. Previously, there was something called Dr. Pierce and Mr. Hyde. I want to just bring them up because they become important later. We'll talk about a later example of it in another installment of Bangers and Mash. So one of the vignettes here is a Klinger subplot. And it was fun. I was trying to look, for the Klinger plots of the episodes of these two seasons, because I have some very vivid memories of some of them. And Klinger tends to get C plots. So they don't even show up in most of the summaries. It'll be like two scenes where Klinger does something ridiculous and then he fails to complete that task. One of the famous ones is he decides to eat a Jeep. Oh, and so he starts taking it nut by nut and swallowing it down in motor oil. And he's chewing on a windshield wiper and stuff.
This is another attempt to get out by being like, I've gone so crazy, I got to swallow a whole Jeep.
Because they realize, of course, the cross-dressing is one note joke, right? So they have to have other jokes. So one of the ones that they do here is Klinger pretends to have gotten beamed by the helicopter blades. And now he's just speaking Arabic.
I will say, too, I mean, something that I really appreciate about the way they handle the whole Klinger cross-dressing thing is that it ends up just becoming a neutral component of his character. They stop making fun of it at all. It's just something that's part of who he is.
Well, like when he meets Potter, Potter's like, I've been here before. Right. There was a soldier who pretended to be a daisy. This is nothing. There's also this great running joke because a lot of his dresses came from his uncle Abdul. In the last episode of this season, he has another uncle who gave him this big wedding dress that he used to get out of World War I. So it's like this long running family bit. Where they all hold on to the dresses after they get out of the war.
But that's funny. I mean, that's so good. That's a really good bit.
And it blends in entirely with all the just like the references to Toledo and, like all these other things. It's just like, my family got up to this. Oh, also we're Lebanese. Oh, also this. Also I cross-dress all the time. We're having fun.
Yeah, and somebody like in the poker game, he's, Klinger's like putting up his hoop earrings.
Oh, right.
As
Margaret's
collateral. And somebody says, don't you think hoops are a little trashy before breakfast? And it's just like, everyone there is yes-anding the bit, which I think is one of the strengths of MASH and of the 4077 is that, you live with those people long enough, you're going to like encourage each other at some point.
Yeah. It's a big family, and that's something that they really lean into on this series. It's like, this is your family.
But also that it's not just a bit. It's also something that he genuinely loves, and they are cool
and they're supportive of it.
Yeah. When Potter tells him to get back into his uniform, Klinger develops a rash from wearing the uniform. So Hawkeye ends up ordering him to wear a slip under the uniform so that he can keep his skin safe. Back to Klinger speaking Arabic. Here's a little bit of what that sounds like.
It's not gonna work, Klinger.
And he falls over into a pile of hay.
Like a relapse.
His eyes have gone back in his head, sir.
He looks like that every day, right after breakfast.
He's shaking.
Private Habib, Radar found me a can of smoked herring for breakfast, and right now I'm deliriously happy cleaning my horse's toenails. Don't spoil it.
Because Potter actually has a horse. He gets a horse a couple episodes into his tenure on the show, and the horse remains a major feature.
That was where we were going to drop the horse corner, AJ, was when the actual real horse showed up, because that's a horse that you can get to know.
Half the frame is just the horse's ass?
Exactly.
I thought about it.
Yeah,
I thought about it a lot.
I bet you did.
But then the hockey thing so inspired him. I looked up in the Oxford Dictionary horse hockey, the phrase, Because obviously it's just horse shit, bullshit, horse pucky, horse hockey.
I've heard horse pucky before, but I never heard horse hockey.
Horse hockey dates back to the 1870s.
Wow.
Which means that hockey was still only like a 50-year-old sport at that time. It first showed up in a newspaper called The Englishman in Calcutta. So it was an English newspaper in India. Yeah.
And the first hockey player? Tim Horston.
That's true.
Yeah. From Calcutta, actually.
It is fucked up that you forgot to mention that earlier, but thank you for clearing the record.
Another thing that's been going on in the plot is that there's a rash of practical jokes, and it's pretty obvious from the beginning that it's BJ who's behind this, because BJ is the unlikely source at this point. This is Mr. Straight-Lace, this is Mr. Wife Guy, but they're little pranks, right? They're nothing like what you see in season 1 of MASH. It's stuff like a leg getting removed from a bench at the mess tent. It's a sugar shaker getting filled with spring-loaded snakes, things like that. Everyone's like, Sydney, why are you here? You usually come over for the poker game and then you go back to Wee Jung Bu or whatever. What's going on? And it turns out that Sydney, he has this, like, Alan Arbus has this monologue in here. He has a patient that killed himself. And so he's using the MASH unit as just an excuse to get away from his usual life and his usual job because he needs to clear his head. And this scene, a really interesting juxtaposition because this episode was written by Alan Alda, as I think we mentioned towards the beginning of the episode. And directed. At the end of this monologue, Frank Burns emerges from his cot under his laundry, and he's like, well, Mr. Psychiatrist isn't such a big man anymore, right? Because Frank Burns is right-wing and he hates the very notion of psychology or psychiatry.
Despite needing it more than anyone else in this fucking unit. But yeah, it's a beautiful monologue. This is so fucking well acted. And they let it sit. Like, again, you start seeing the DNA for stuff like Scrubs later on.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, absolutely for Scrubs. And the tone shifts that Scrubs is able to pull off. Yeah.
I would argue that Scrubs is really great at it. I don't think they're even in the same ballpark as MASH in terms of being able to turn on the dime in the way that MASH is.
Yeah.
And again, I love Scrubs, but having this monologue go from that to Frank being like, well, and like emerging like from a pile of clothes. And I'm just like, God damn it. This is so fucking masterful.
Yeah. And Frank's like, unlike all those loonies that you take care of, I'm the most normal man on earth.
Yes.
Meanwhile, Klinger keeps trying to like speak Arabic in every encounter that he has because he's still trying to just go off of the head injury route. At which point Margaret calls him a Transylvanian lunatic. There's another plot where an ambulance comes careening into the camp and everyone's like, what the fuck just happened? They're getting all of the wounded out of there. Potter's about to chew out the driver, and it turns out the driver had been shot and he died. And that's why the ambulance crashed into the 4077.
After first being like, I'm going to yell at this guy. I'm going to like dress this guy down, get him in there. He's always
the moment he finds out the driver is dead, all he can do is turn around and walk off.
Yeah.
Because he still has all that flowing through him, you know. And then later, Radar ends up writing the note to the family about him. You know, it's supposed to be from Potter and Potter signs it, but it's Radar talking about this friendship that he had with the ambulance driver.
Yeah.
It's just a really interesting little note. And again, these are all like these little things that are done in 2 scenes because it's a letter episode and because they're sort of flicking between all of these different stories.
It's very, very impressive at this point in the show how quickly and effectively they're able to pivot between the dramatic beats and the comedic beats. It no longer feels disjointed or forced.
Yeah.
It just works. It's clear that at this point, there's enough consistency that they can rely on in terms of the performances and the writing to just trust the writing and go for it, you know?
And to trust the characters, too. The fact that we get to see Margaret here be like, I don't need therapy because I just push it all down.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, that's Margaret.
Because she has to compartmentalize. She is not only a nurse, she's the chief nurse. She has all of these other women working according to her command. And she has to be able to hold all that down for the sake of all these people who desperately need help.
Yeah.
And she just loses it on these random things. She gets very mad that Sydney's jockstrap is out in the open. Standards and practices wouldn't let you see the jockstrap, and it does make the scene a little abstract. But
say abstract jockstrap 10 times fast.
Abstract jockstrap. Abstract jock. Oh, shit.
Wow, it's really hard.
Yeah. And here again, we see more of Frank's continuing insanity. He's gone from just being a jingoistic pervert to being very paranoid. Everything is about like how people are going to get him. He's digging a foxhole directly next to the swamp.
I mean, in fairness, these aren't totally paranoid ideas. People are very much trying to get him at all times.
That's true.
Yes.
It's just because he sucks real bad.
Right.
So BJ ends up pranking Frank by filling the foxhole with water and getting Sidney Freedman to yell air raid at the top of his lungs so that Frank wakes up and dives straight into the mud.
Pretty good.
And again, what a fall. My God, the falls on this show. Incredible. And then once he's in the water, like he can't really swim. So he's just kind of doing like this half bird flap thing that's so fucking funny. Well, and again, so like Frank is still kind of stuck in this sort of sitcom cartoon character land, right?
He's kind of the Urkel of the show.
And now we have to like cut over to Alan Alda's arc in this, which is scolding an airman.
A bomber pilot ends up crashing nearby. And so he's at the camp. And for him, war is a 9-to-5 job. And he's able to just hang out very far away from the action.
The sky is so beautiful.
And so Hawkeye drags him into the OR. He's like, oh, I want you to see this. And he sees a small child who's been hit by a bomb. And he says, you know, which one is it? Is it ours or theirs? And they say, that doesn't fucking matter.
And yes, we get a little bit more of Alan Skolda here, as I like to call him.
And the bomber pilot is, you know, he can't handle it anymore. This is the first time the war has become real. Because, I don't know, it depends on who you talk to, I guess. But I certainly have heard stories of that kind of resentment that like infantrymen have for pilots. And I'm sure that's become even more, also snipers. And this has become even more pronounced in the age of drone warfare, where you can just live in New Jersey and go to an office and kill a bunch of people at a wedding and then go home.
Alan Alda has a line here, 40,000 feet is a long way to come down.
Yeah.
Which I thought was very well written.
So after doing this prank here, Sidney goes home. He's feeling a little bit better and he heads out. And that's basically the episode.
Well, spring came to the MASH unit, right?
Yeah.
And they get to unveil the cherry blossom tree, which is just sticks.
It's great.
Look at them all pretending to be cold in Malibu.
They are doing their level best, but you can tell that they are hot as fuck in this.
They're sweating through
I think
them.
it was Ken Levine on his blog said that if the actors were getting a little too eager to give notes and getting a little too up their own ass, they'd write a quote cold episode.
That's fine.
Which meant you had to shoot on location in your fucking jacket and sweater in California. Just a couple of episodes to mention. I mentioned the nurses earlier. That's just another episode that is showing how the show has decided to like change Margaret's relationship with the other characters. She starts to get along with her subordinates. You can look at that episode and be like, this isn't exactly the most military thing in the world, but it was necessary for the show to move on and to show Margaret as more of a person. So that's another one that I recommend. Also, one of the nurses in that episode is the voice of Mrs. Puff from SpongeBob.
Oh, and you can tell in the episode. It's a delight.
Yeah, and then there's some more arcs, some more B plots involving Frank and Margaret and how this relationship is ending and, you know, getting things back from Frank and things like that. The last part of the season shows Frank actually being less insane. They're kind of showing where he could go if he's going to fit into the more serious version of the show.
Which he chose not to do.
Yeah, which is still whiny and it's still a child, but it's not as zany and wacky. And it is probably something that they couldn't have sustained. It's probably just not a very good character at that point. Margaret can stand to be matured because she basically started as nothing.
Right.
But Frank has so much, Larry Linville has so much to offer in this one niche that if they get rid of that, what do they have left? They have a character with zero redeeming qualities. Right. We feel bad for him sometimes, but we never feel good about him.
Which, I mean, characters with zero redeeming qualities can be fun.
Yeah.
It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is a great example of that. But even in that case, they are committing to a specific tone and tenor. And, you know, even with these shitty ass characters, like Mac gets to have a real character moment every once in a while, you know? Mac's the only one who's like sort of a person.
Also, Rob McElhenney just changed his last name legally to Mac.
That's really weird.
His name is now Rob Mac.
All right.
Now we get to the last episode of season 5, Margaret's Marriage.
Yes.
This is not a super amazing episode. We had to skip one of my favorites, which is called Movie Tonight, where they get a film reel of My Darling Clementine. The film keeps breaking, and so it just basically turns into a camp-wide talent show. Everyone gets to sing and dance.
You
and,
had me watch this episode, Brian. I think outside of the preview of the podcast,
Gary Berghoff
just
does
this.
his Ed Sullivan impression. It's really fun.
Yeah.
They all do an impression of William Christopher, who plays Father Mulcahy. All of them do their version of his voice, including even Margaret O'Houlihan adopting a falsetto higher than her own voice.
Oh, hell yeah.
Margaret's marriage starts in a very typical MASH fashion. We are in the OR and people are riffing and again singing. They start singing Stormy Weather. Frank is melting down because Margaret is calling one Colonel Donald Penobscot.
I completely misheard this name. I had it as Panopticon. So thank you for having me fix that.
Here's the thing, AJ. I'm not surprised.
Anymore.
That is classic you. You were probably talking the whole time. And so that was just what you were able to pick up while you were also just chatting about something.
At the screen? Yeah. I watch these alone. Like, yeah. I mean, what do you think? How do you think I watch these?
I think I just said.
Yeah, no, you have not so much of an internal monologue as a running external monologue.
Look at Colonel Penobscot over here. Look at this fucking guy. So tall, big chin.
So Penobscot is calling, and everyone's like, Margaret, okay, he put kind of a ring on it, but when are you actually getting married? And this scene has too many visual elements. I wasn't able to clip it, which broke my heart because it's so funny. Frank and Margaret are talking like at the same time, and Frank gets her to ask Donald, okay, what's the date? And then Donald decides, I'm coming to the 407 7th. We're going to get something figured out here. And Frank is, of course, losing his mind. He has no idea what Donald is going to do to him. He knows that he is a very large man.
The note I took here is, Frank's gonna get annihilated.
Yeah, he's going to get the shit beaten out of him, as far as he knows. Turns out Donald doesn't have any clue that Frank has been stooping Margaret for 4 years out of this 3-year war. And Donald is like, Frank, you're the friend that told Margaret that I should just fucking nut up. Mm-hmm. So you should be the best man at this wedding. He's currently on top of Frank when he says that, because Frank has been running away and Donald had to tackle him.
Right. Frank thinks that Donald's about to beat the living shit out of him.
So Lieutenant Colonel Penobscot is played by Beeson Carroll, which is quite a name. He's an actor mostly known for this. This is the thing he did. And he doesn't even, when Donald comes back to the show a couple times, he's not played by Beeson Carroll. He's played by another actor.
I don't think this is a fantastic performance. I think he looks the part.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's tall, he's handsome, but you know.
Yeah, later he's played by Mike Henry. I wanted to just grab this little clip. This is a scene between Potter and Radar, just in Colonel Potter's office. I thought it would be a great example of like, this is what the show sounds like. This is how it's written now, and this is the distinctive tone of seasons 4 and 5 of MASH.
What's the latest poop on the wedding?
Captain Pearson and Honeycutt want to give Colonel Penobscot a smoker.
Good, good. Did you tell him no horsing around and Class A uniforms at the wedding?
Yes, sir. Captain Pierce says he's going to be on his best behavior, but he won't wear pants.
You tell him no pants, no champagne. You got to know how to handle these guys. What else?
Cook baked a cake, chocolate frosting.
Has anybody licked this? Oh, go on.
All the nurses want to give Major Houlihan a shower.
Probably want it real clean for the wedding. Just a joke.
I know.
Is this your first marriage ceremony, Radar?
No, sir. It was at my Uncle Ernie's.
Fun?
Oh, yeah. They had potato salad and pecan pie, punch, turkey, jello, tongue sandwiches, and chopped liver.
Sounds wonderful.
I threw up all over the flower girl.
I mean, because I had grabbed a couple like Radar and Colonel Blake scenes in the first Bangers of MASH that we did. You can really tell how different this is, right? They play down the Radar aspect of Radar, where he is able to predict everything that happens in the conversation, but also Potter is able to hold his own. He does not need his company clerk to like hold his hand through every aspect of life.
Oh, absolutely. And it's also really lovely to see him be fiercely competitive in the basketball match a little bit earlier in this episode. Like,
this is just two men getting to know each other better. And they're very comfortable just letting this scene doesn't have to be in here at all. There's nothing necessary in here. They just are explaining where they are in the episode, but it's here and it's funny. We're having a good time, but it's kind of low key now too, right? Nothing big. So we move on to Margaret Houlihan's bridal shower. She's with all of these other nurses, the nurses that she finally developed a real relationship with in the episode The Nurses. And One of these nurses is actually played by Mike Farrell's wife, and she will play that nurse all the way through the end of the show. We also have mainstay Nurse Kelly.
Dual residual household, by the way, for the Farrells is so fucking cool. MASH residuals, and you're getting two sets?
Well, they're divorced now, but yeah.
Oh, no.
Owned.
I jinxed it.
They were married for a long time, but they did get divorced. I think they're
because of the MASH residuals.
That's right. It was a nasty, bitter fight. Who gets the MASH residuals?
Both of them, because they were both in it.
Then we have, of course, Donald's bachelor party with the officers and the corporals. Everyone is fucking wasted. They're out of their minds, drunk. And while Donald is unconscious, Hawkeye and BJ decide to put his entire lower half in a cast, saying that he broke his legs when he wakes up.
I don't get it. Like, why would they do this? This is
because it's a funny thing to do.
They're very mean.
What's interesting is, again, this is the end of season 5. This is a season 1 joke.
Exactly.
And this is a season 1 B plot joke.
This doesn't feel true to who these characters are at this point.
Yeah.
I didn't understand.
It's a little too frat boy for Alan Skolda. Alan,
that's right.
Alan
Skolda. Yeah, I've been saying this.
So, they're on their best behavior at the wedding, but he is just propped up. He can't even wear a suit because, again, of the cast. He's just wearing a bathrobe.
I mean,
he just has to stand there.
The visual gag of it does work. Yeah. It's funny. It's just, it doesn't feel grounded.
And Margaret shows up in this beautiful dress from Klinger's Uncle Zach. And... I like this Uncle Abdul and Uncle Zach, but
that feels very true to Ohio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now
that I'm thinking about it, I think it would actually be funnier if he had just broken his pelvis. Like he had shattered his pelvis the night before.
He
somehow
actually got injured.
That would be fun.
So this is actually the second wedding of the series. The first wedding was Klinger getting married to his wife back in Toledo over the phone. And he also wore the wedding dress for that one. That wedding will end in divorce, just like Mike Farrell's real life wedding. But not Jamie Farr's. I think Jamie Farr is still happily married. That's just a whole Klinger arc that I don't think we'll ever cover on Bangers and Bash. It's just like a little thing that happens. The choppers, of course, come in. This is, as always, an episode of MASH, and we have to go to the OR. Everyone runs off. Donald is stuck alone in the tent in his cast, and he gets Father Mulcahy to roll him just outside of the OR so he can look in the window and see surgery. This also gives us a very famous image from the show, which is Margaret running straight out of the wedding in the dress with her bouquet of flowers, with her veil, standing over the wounded, doing triage.
Really, really good image.
So effective.
This is well done.
It's kind of a nightmare, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, what's the worst thing that could happen to your wedding? A bunch of dead soldiers. Just keep that in mind. Keep that nightmare in mind, because this is an image the show will actually return to in a very interesting way in a different episode. Donald is able to watch her do surgery. Unclear what the point of this scene is. It's almost like there's a sense of inadequacy that he gets from her, but this doesn't lead anywhere in this episode or really any episode, because he doesn't become a main character. He's always sort of an off-screen presence.
He does find observing the surgery to be too much to handle. He gets squeamish.
Yeah. He's sort of, he's before this point, he's, he looks like a linebacker. He's this ideal of masculinity and, army heroism or whatever. And watching, I guess, the true heroism of saving lives as a doctor is too much for him.
And maybe too that Margaret possesses a certain amount of stoicism or whatever
or
that he does not.
Agency too, right? At a time where this is the early 50s, it's a lot for a woman to have this kind of control over herself and her life.
Yeah.
And Margaret loves authority, right? She, the old joke was that she fucked everybody who outranked her. It's important to her that Donald outranks her. She brings that up when she first talks about him.
It genuinely just feels like to me like this was a plot thread that they were like, well, we'll throw this out, and if it's worth exploring, we'll do it. And it just was not worth exploring.
Happens a lot on TV.
And maybe it's one of those things where it's like, if this actor works out, we're going to keep bringing him back. Like with Klinger, right? Klinger was a one-off character that they were just like, this is kind of fun. Let's do more.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a friend of mine got cast on Succession, and he's in a couple scenes in a very notable role, and then he just goes away because the writers decided to not do anything else with his character.
And they have a final moment minus the epilogue. The epilogue is whatever. But the final moment here, I think, is what's really important. The helicopter takes off. She says goodbye, kind of in the same way that Blake said goodbye to everyone. Everyone walks down the hill, and Frank is still there, and he just says goodbye, Margaret, to himself. This marks where Frank could go if Larry Linville had decided to stay on the series. It probably wouldn't have worked. He decided not to come back for the next season. This wasn't like Wayne Rogers where it was like a big dispute. You know, after season 5, that's usually like when the main contract ends and you start renegotiating across the board.
They've hit 100 episodes, so at this
Certainly,
point,
yeah.
He gets his residuals.
He gets his residuals.
Yeah, it's safe for syndication. It's all that stuff. And he just felt like he hit the limit. There's an interview with him right as season 6 is starting where you can see he's kind of uncomfortable about it. He probably spent the rest of his life like thinking maybe I should have stayed or maybe I did do
for
the
like
right
one
thing.
more season
I don't know.
or something.
It's one of those what ifs.
Wayne Rogers definitely said that if he knew that the series was going to go for 11 seasons, he would have stayed.
Well, of course.
Then he could have gotten those marriage ruining residuals. However, I think he made the right choice, and you'll find out why I think he made the right choice. They offered him a send off. Come back for the beginning of next season, and we'll give you Frank's last hurrah. And I imagine they could have written something absolutely spectacular. Like just the lengths that they could have never brought Frank to before. They could have had him totally immolate that camp.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Set the whole goddamn thing on fire.
And he said, no, I've got to make the clean break.
Yeah.
Which is, so they have to write him off. And the way that they write him off next season is not going to be super satisfying because how could it be?
Right.
If he's not there to do it.
Yeah. However, I think the show becomes the best version of itself after that point.
Wow.
So I guess
some look forward to.
So that will be what we talk about next time, whenever it is that we roll back around to the 4077 and talk about the Bangers and Mash installment numero 3.
Oh yeah. If you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope you have, we've got a lot more like it in our back catalog, including the first Bangers and Mash, right? That's a premium episode. So for a mere $5 of your money each month, the people who don't subscribe to the Patreon, I feel like are not getting our best work. It's not that what we put out on the free feed is subpar or anything. It's just like, I feel like we're able to go deeper on those episodes.
We're the most on our shit for a lot of the premium episodes.
I think so. And I think that's because it's stuff that we are particularly passionate about. We just really go for it. Anyway, I've sold you on that shit enough. Go check it out. Patreon.com/worstofall is the URL for that. Also, said this at the beginning.
Yes.
I'm directing a play. It's called Goatman. It is a really wonderful story about a young woman who loses her mother, but she kind of didn't like her mom very much to begin with. She goes up into the woods for a camping trip and chaos ensues. If that sounds interesting to you, definitely check it out.
If you are in or around the New York City area.
It is going up as part of the She NYC Festival, which is basically ladies can do theater too, it turns out. And that's what the festival's for.
Oh, man.
And the performances are on Wednesday, July 16 at 7:30 p.m. and Thursday, July 17 at the same time. Ticket link down in the show notes. If you can't make it, but you want to, contribute, kick in, whatever, we're also doing a GoFundMe to help cover the cost of capitalizing the production. Feel free to kick in some coin for that if you are feeling particularly generous. If you show up, come through, say hi. I'd be happy to talk, unless you're weird, in which case don't talk to me.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. If while you're in or around New York City seeing Josh's show, you also want to check out me, AJ, in something. You can come see, I am acting in Matt Cox and Stephen Stout's play. Stephen Stout, a previous guest on this podcast, came on to talk about Team America World Police.
That's right. And Matt Cox, previous actor on this podcast.
That's
where
true.
He played
As Benny Brush.
Benny Brush in the Gerber episode. Yeah.
Also, the minds behind Puffs, Matt wrote Puffs. Steve was a producer on Puffs. They wrote a show called 2002, which is what if not another teen movie and a Pixar film had a baby.
Yes.
And
it has nothing to do with the Arthur C. Clarke science fiction series.
It does not, as far as I know. And maybe there's an obscure reference to that. But that one is playing on Friday, July 11th at 7, Saturday, July 12th at 7, Saturday, July 19th at 7, Sunday, July 20th at 7, and Tuesday, July 22nd at 3 p.m. For the weirdest matinee I think I will ever do in my life. But that is at the Under St. Mark's Theater. We'll put a link in the description below. But yeah, make it a double header.
Hey,
see Josh's play on Thursday. Come see us on Friday. It'll be a hoot.
And one more thing.
Whoa.
If you want to see yet another play, one that maybe I'm in.
My God.
What? You are out of luck. I'm not doing one.
Oh, fuck.
So,
don't bait and switch me like that.
I think out of all these episodes, the Dear Sigmund episode hit me the hardest. Not only because it is just so masterfully constructed and so wonderfully performed, but because it's kind of how I've been feeling lately. It's been hard to find hope. And there was a line in Dear Sigmund that really hit me hard. It's when the good doctor is summing up his experience at the 4077 and having to move on from this trauma of having one of his patients die on him. And he says, if you can't find it and you can't feel it, you just have to make it. And that's MASH. And that's life. I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
I'm the worst of all possible Brians.
And I'm the worst of all possible Joshes. See you next week.